Hey guys, tonight we begin with a chill that seeps not just through the air, but through history itself. The kind that creeps beneath your skin and settles in your bones. The kind that no amount of firewood or tea can fix. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in a Victorian manor house, majestic, towering, and wrapped in an icy fog that blurs the line between beauty and punishment. From the outside, the place looks alive with golden windows and soft candlelight. But don't let it fool you. The warmth you see belongs only to those upstairs. Down below, beneath the polished floors and velvet drapes, lies another world, one of cold fingers, cracked lips, and breath that lingers in the air like ghostly smoke. You're a servant in this grand house, and winter has come to claim its due. It's early morning, though you wouldn't know it by the light. The sun rises late in the Victorian winter, and when it does, it's more suggestion than reality. You wake before dawn, in a narrow, low-ceilinged room, at the very bottom of the house, pressed against three other bodies, under a thin blanket that smells faintly of coal dust and damp wool. You can see your own breath, even before you sit up. The walls sweat with condensation, and frost paints the window panes with delicate mocking lace. The air feels heavy, the kind that makes your chest ache when you breathe too deeply. You don't have time to shiver, though. The bell in the corridor rings a sharp metallic reminder that someone upstairs has decided the day has begun. The head housemaid's voice cuts through the dark. Up now, fire won't light itself. There's no lingering in bed, no lazy stretch beneath warm sheets. Comfort is a luxury for the gentry. For you, warmth is a task, something earned by blistered fingers and endless movement. You pull on yesterday's stockings, they're still damp from yesterday's snow, and lace your boots with hands that don't quite bend all the way from the cold. Your uniform is rough wool, faded from years of scrubbing. It's stiff and unyielding, like armor forged for a war you never signed up for. Stepping into the corridor feels like stepping into an ice cellar. The air bites, and your shoes slip slightly on the stone floor, dusted with frost. The mansion is quiet, but not still. There's always a faint hum, wood creaking pipes, sighing, and somewhere above the muffled crackle of a fire that isn't yours. You carry your little lantern down the servants' passage, the flame trembling with every draft. The house has more gaps than walls. Wind snakes through cracks, whispers under doors, and slides down the grand staircase like an invisible guest. The smell of soot and cold iron fills your nose. Somewhere in the dark, you hear the faint squeak of a rat. Historians still argue whether Victorian houses were marvels of innovation or glorified refrigerators. For the servants, the answer was simple: both. The upper floors gleamed with luxury chandeliers, marble fireplaces, velvet curtains. But all that beauty was propped up by the damp misery below. Heating a house this size was a full-time occupation, and that occupation was yours. You make your way to the scullery where the day always begins. The stone floor is wet and shining, not from cleaning, but from the water that's frozen and thawed overnight. The bucket by the door is half ice. You pick up the poker kneel before the cold grate and begin the ritual of coaxing a flame to life. Flint-kindling breath, patience. The air stings your nose as smoke curls upward, biting your throat. When it catches, the warmth is barely enough to feel, but you guard it like treasure. Fire. The master's favorite luxury. Your greatest burden. Before you can even enjoy the small victory of a spark, you're on to the next hearth. Upstairs in the family rooms, the fires must already be roaring by the time the household stirs. It's not just about heat, it's about appearances. If the mistress of the house wakes to cold air, someone will be blamed, and it won't be the butler. You move quickly, balancing the coal scuttle, trailing ashes as you go. Every step echoes in the narrow halls. You're invisible but essential, a ghost maintaining the illusion of comfort for people who never see the frost creeping up the inside of your walls. Upstairs, everything gleams. Carpets, portraits, mirrors, all bathed in the flicker of early firelight. You kneel again, feed the embers, and watch the flames climb, feeling your knuckles crack as you work. The warmth brushes your face for just a second before you stand, and retreat heat is not for you. You leave it behind like a gift you can never open. By the time the first tray of tea is served, your back aches and your hands are blackened with soot. The house is awake now, voices calling bells, ringing footsteps above like distant thunder. You're already invisible again, fading into the rhythm of chores and commands. The rich complain about drafts while you haul wood through hallways colder than the garden outside. Outside, the frost glitters on the hedges. Inside, it glitters on your knuckles. The irony isn't lost on you. Every painting, every candle, every polished piece of silver in this house depends on your exhaustion. The masters may write letters by the firelight, but you are the one who keeps that fire alive. Without you, their warmth dies before the ink dries. And still, when evening comes, your own hearth will be no brighter than a dying ember. Historians often describe Victorian Britain as an age of progress: steam engines, gas lamps, railways, stretching across the land. But progress had a price, and it was often paid in calloused hands. Servants were the invisible machinery that kept the grand houses running, human engines fueled by exhaustion and cold tea. The wages barely covered food, let alone comfort. Yet to the outside world, you were lucky to have a place indoors. If only they knew how that indoors felt at dawn. You catch a glimpse of yourself, reflected in a hallway mirror, as you pass a figure blurred by steam and smoke. For a fleeting second, you look almost like one of them, neat and composed in your uniform. But your cheeks are raw, your lips cracked, your eyes heavy. Behind you, the fire crackles for someone else. You straighten your back and keep walking. There's no time for mirrors. The first bell of the morning rings again, sharp and impatient. Another order. Another room to heat. The day is young, and winter has only begun. As you trudge down the corridor, your boots leaving wet prints on the stone, the house exhales a low groaning sound. The walls seem to breathe in the cold with you. You think fleetingly that even the mansion itself feels alive and just as tired. By the time the clock strikes 6, the fires are blazing upstairs. The masters will rise soon, stepping into slippers, warmed by hands they never see. Their breath won't fog in the air, and they'll marvel at how cozy the house feels. You'll be back in the scullery by then, rubbing your fingers near a weak flame, pretending not to dream of sitting by a real fire. Cold, always cold, even in memory. And that's where our story begins. In the flicker of a servant's lantern in the shadows beneath the marble stairs, where the warmth of the Victorian age was built on frostbitten hands, the bell rings again, before the light even changes, and your body moves before your mind does. That's how it works. Now habit, survival, muscle memory, trained by years of cold mornings. You pull on your boots still damp from yesterday's frost, and feel the chill bite at your toes like tiny teeth. Outside the small servant's window, the world is slate gray. The frost on the panes looks like lace, beautiful but cruel, Victorian artistry from the hand of winter itself. The corridor smells of ashes and soap. Your breath hangs in the air as you hurry toward the main stairwell, where the stone steps gleam faintly under a layer of ice. There's no railing down here, of course. Servants didn't need them, according to the architect, who would never have set foot in this part of the house. You balance the tray of kindling carefully, one hand clutching the edge of your apron as you move through the dim passage, every step echoing like a clock tick. It's the start of another day. The world above your head still sleeps. Up there behind embroidered curtains, the family lies tucked under feather quilts, dreaming in warmth. Down here, time runs faster. You work before they wake, so everything appears effortless when they do. The trick is to make hardship invisible, to erase your labor so completely it looks like magic. Your first task is to wake the range. The kitchen stove is an iron beast that dominates the room, blackened from years of use. You open its door, revealing the faint orange of last night's embers, and begin to feed it coal. Sparks jump at your hands. You flinch, then lean closer anyway. The pain from heat is almost welcome. It reminds you what warmth feels like. The kitchen gradually fills with that metallic tang of burning coal, mixed with something else. Stale bread, yesterday's stew, maybe hope. You scrub pots from the night before, your fingers submerged in icy water that never quite warms. The soap bites into your skin like frostbite in disguise. Around you, the other servants stir boots, thudding skirts, rustling the muffled cough of the scullery maid who hasn't stopped wheezing since Christmas. Conversation is quiet and clipped. No one has the energy for gossip before breakfast. The only voices are those of the kettle's hissing and the occasional barked order from the cook, whose temper could thaw a block of ice, but never seems to warm the room. The clock strikes 5. Time to carry coal upstairs. You heave the scuttle to your shoulder, its metal rim cold enough to sting through your sleeve. The hallway up to the main floor is narrow and steep, built like an afterthought to the grandeur above. Each step creaks, and you wince. One misstep, one noise, and the butler will have something to say about grace in motion. You reach the first parlor where frost glitters faintly on the inside of the window glass. You kneel and start to prepare the fire, working quickly. Flint kindling coal. You can't waste time admiring the furniture, though sometimes your eyes betray you a glimpse of velvet, a glint of crystal, the faint scent of lavender and wax polish. Everything up here exists in soft focus. The rugs muffle your steps, the wallpaper swallows sound, and yet the air is still so cold it could snap. Historians still debate whether Victorian houses were marvels of design or disasters of insulation. You don't need to debate it. You live it. Even the great houses, those massive estates built with marble staircases and chandeliers, were drafty as barns. Heat rose through chimneys, instead of staying in rooms and gaps in window frames whispered like ghosts. Fires had to be lit constantly, not just for warmth, but to protect the illusion of gentility. A flickering flame meant civilization. A cold hearth meant scandal. You move from room to room, repeating the ritual. Flint kindling coal. The rhythm becomes hypnotic. Sparks smoke the faint glow of orange. You breathe in the soot until your lungs taste like ash. Each fire you light is a victory you don't get to celebrate. The warmth belongs to someone else. By the time you reach the nursery, dawn is creeping faintly through the fog outside. You pause for a second to look out the window. The garden below is white and silent. Even the statues look frozen, mid-prayer. Somewhere out there, the stable boys are already at work, cracking ice from the water trough, stamping their feet to stay alive. You envy them for the air, even if it's colder. At least they can see the sky. A faint cry from one of the children breaks your thought. You hurry to the next fireplace. The nursery is decorated with faded wallpaper of rabbits and flowers, all summer scenes, mocking the season outside. The little boy sleeps under a thick blanket, one hand resting on a toy horse. You light his fire, gently, careful not to wake him. The flames bloom softly, painting the room gold. You can almost feel it on your face, almost. Then you're gone again. Back to the hall, back to the cold. Downstairs, breakfast is being prepared for the family. The smell of fried bread drifts faintly through the corridor, taunting your empty stomach. Your own meal will come later, if the cook remembers. Probably tea, watery and gray, maybe a crust of bread that tastes faintly of smoke. You've learned to be grateful for anything that isn't frozen solid. By 6, the bells begin their morning symphony. One for the master's dressing room, another for the mistress, the dining room, the study, the drawing room, all calling at once. The sound fills the air like angry birds. You pick up the coal scuttle again, your arm already trembling, and head toward the grand staircase. This is the forbidden zone, the space where upstairs and downstairs collide. The carpet here is thick enough to swallow your footsteps. You're not supposed to look around, but it's impossible not to. The portraits on the walls watch you as you pass. Men in powdered wigs, women with impossible necks and colder eyes. Generations of people who never knew what it felt like to wake in a room without warmth. At the top of the stairs, you pause to adjust your apron. The butler's voice echoes faintly from the hall, precise and disapproving. He doesn't have to shout. His authority travels like cold air everywhere at once. You knock softly at the master's door, wait for the answering grunt, and enter. The fire here died overnight. The room smells of damp linen and old perfume. You work quickly, silently feeding the fire until the first flicker appears. You glance at the bed, four-poster draped in velvet, the man inside still asleep. His breath is steady, peaceful. You envy that sound. You step back, wipe your hands on your apron, and turn to leave. The warmth licks your back like a ghost begging you to stay. But you can't. You never can. The next room awaits. And the next. By the time you finish your morning circuit, the sun has finally broken through the fog. It's weak, watery light, but enough to make the frost on the windows sparkle like diamonds. The family will call this beauty. You'll call it another hour before breakfast. Historians often say that the Victorian Servants' Day began before dawn. What they forget to mention is that it also began before feeling, before warmth, before hope. The work didn't just wear down the body, it froze the spirit. And yet somehow you keep moving. Because movement means survival. Stopping means cold. You head back down to the servants' hall, your body trembling from the temperature shift as you step from warm air into the icy gut of the house again. The others are gathered around the kitchen table clutching tin mugs. Steam rises faintly from the tea, turning the air gray. Someone laughs a dry, brittle sound that vanishes almost instantly. The cook passes you a crust of bread. You eat it slowly, savoring even the smallest trace of heat from your cup. The bread tastes like smoke and dust. Still, you close your eyes and let it linger. Outside, the bells ring again. Time to move. Because in a Victorian winter, rest is never free and warmth is always borrowed. You've already been awake for hours, and yet the day has barely begun to thaw. The light that spills through the narrow window wells is a pale gray, the kind of light that makes dust shimmer like snow. The air in the servants' hall still hangs heavy with the smell of coal smoke and boiled linen. You'd think after so many years of doing this that your body would have adapted. But the truth is, no one ever really gets used to a Victorian winter. You just learn to move before your fingers go numb. Your next task is to dress. Not yourself, heaven forbid, but the family upstairs. Dressing a Victorian household was a ritual as delicate and exacting as any church ceremony. You carry the steaming basin of water up the back stairs, careful not to spill a single drop. It's the only hot water in the house right now, heated in the scullery below, and it's meant for the master's morning shave. You climb slowly, listening to the soft chime of clocks echoing down the corridor, each one marking the time you'll never have for yourself. The first room you enter is the mistress's dressing room. The air is warmer here, faintly perfumed with lavender and starch, but still cool enough to see your breath. You bow your head as she greets you with a sigh, half a human sound, half a complaint. Her nightgown, embroidered and soft, would have paid your wages for 3 months. She doesn't look at you when she speaks. "Fire's low," she says, rubbing her hands. You know what that means. You kneel again, pull the poker from the grate, and coax the flames higher, pretending the warmth isn't stinging tears into your eyes. Victorian servants called it being invisible. To be good at your job was to disappear. The less your masters noticed you, the more successful you were. But in winter, invisibility could feel like erasure. The cold made you remember your body, your raw knuckles, your aching knees, your trembling breath, and yet no one else seemed to see it. You wait quietly while the mistress's maid lays out her gown, silk trimmed with lace, pale as frost. Your own hands are cracked and red, but you smooth the fabric as carefully as if it were glass. Upstairs, everything is soft, delicate, and easily damaged. Downstairs, everything is hard, sharp, and meant to endure. You envy nothing in this room except the fire. Once the mistress is dressed, you retreat backward, head bowed, and close the door without a sound. The corridor greets you with its usual chill. Even the walls feel cold, as though the house itself resents your presence. Next comes the master's room. His valet, a tall man with a face like carved stone, gives you a brief nod as you deliver the basin. The master is awake, seated by the window, his robe thick and fur-lined. He's complaining about the draft again, as if his discomfort is an act of injustice against the British Empire itself. You glance at the heavy drapes lined with wool and tied with gold cords, and wonder what it must feel like to have so much between yourself and the cold. While you're there, you notice something odd. The master's breath fogs the air, just faintly. Even in all his comfort, even with his fur-lined robes and velvet slippers, the cold still finds a way in. It makes you smile inside, just a little. The winter, at least, is democratic. You hurry back down the servants' stairs, the narrow passage where the air never changes temperature. It's always just above freezing, even in July. You've learned to keep one hand on the wall as you go. The stone sweats with condensation slick as ice. Somewhere below someone coughs a long, deep rattle that sounds like it's been echoing for years. The older housemaid, Clara, has had that cough since Michaelmas. She jokes it's her companion. Everyone in service has one. A cough, a limp, a burn scar, a secret ache that never quite heals. In the kitchen, chaos reigns. The cook barks orders like a general, preparing for battle. Steam fills the air, making everything damp and sticky. Pots boil, pans hiss, and you can't tell if you're sweating or freezing anymore. The kitchen fire is the hottest in the house, but none of the heat stays. It vanishes up the chimney, leaving the floor cold enough to freeze spilled water into tiny, treacherous mirrors. You start scrubbing the dishes from the early breakfast service. The scullery sink is filled with water so cold it burns. You dip your hands in anyway because you have to. The sound of metal on stone plates, ladles, spoons creates a steady rhythm, like a cruel kind of music. One of the younger girls hums softly to it, a tune you don't recognize. Her sleeves are rolled up her arms, raw and pink. She looks about 15, maybe younger. You wonder how long it will take before her skin looks like yours. The kitchen maid beside you laughs suddenly. You ever think she says that if we all stopped for one day, the whole place would just freeze solid? You smile, though you know it's not really a joke. She's right. The masters upstairs would wake to silence their fires. Dead. Their tea cold. Their world suddenly as frigid as yours. But of course that will never happen. Servants don't stop. Not for weather, not for illness, not even for hope. By mid-morning, the house is fully awake. Boots stamp across floors, bells ring constantly, and somewhere above the piano begins to play. The melody drifts down through the floorboards, soft, graceful, and unbearably warm. You keep washing. The water grows cloudier, colder, heavier. When the potboy replaces it with a new bucket, steam curls briefly from the surface, and for a moment, you feel the ghost of heat. Then, it fades. Historians still argue whether the Victorians truly understood comfort or only the appearance of it. Every photograph shows elegance, lace, light refinement, but none show the shivering servants who made that image possible. You think about that as you scrub another plate clean. You're polishing someone else's idea of grace. The cook finally calls for lunch preparations, and the kitchen erupts again. You move to help chop vegetables, your fingers stiff and slow. A slip of the knife, a flash of pain. Blood wells up bright and fast. You wrap it in a rag and keep going. No one notices. Everyone's too busy keeping up with the demands of upstairs. By noon, the air outside glows white. Snow begins to fall again, silent and endless. You watch it through the small window by the sink. For a second, the world looks pure, gentle, untouched. But then you blink, and the illusion breaks. You're still in the basement, surrounded by the hiss of pots and the clang of dishes, your breath fogging in the air. The snow is just another chore waiting to happen, something you'll have to shovel from the path before nightfall. Lunch for the servants is quick, barely 15 minutes. A thin soup, a hunk of bread, maybe a cup of weak tea, if you're lucky. You eat standing, one hand holding the bowl, the other still red from washing. The warmth lasts just long enough to make you miss it when it's gone. Then the bell rings again. Always the bell. You take a deep breath, wipe your hands, and head back toward the stairs. The masters will dine soon, and the silver must shine bright enough to blind. You'll polish it until you can see your reflection in the tray, a face pale as frost eyes, tired but still alive. And when you carry that tray upstairs, through the hush of the great hall, you'll feel the warmth of their roaring firebrush against your skin for a single fleeting moment, just enough to remind you what it feels like to be human. Then you'll turn, descend, and vanish again into the cold. The first spark of morning has long since faded into the dull, colorless light of midday. It should feel warmer by now, but the manor has a way of swallowing sunlight whole. You can stand beside a window hand pressed against the glass and feel nothing but cold stone and emptiness staring back. Outside the garden is a sea of white snow, drifted high along the hedges, the pond frozen solid, the statues rimed in frost like marble ghosts. Inside, it's no better. Every corridor breathes cold air. Every floorboard holds the chill like a secret. And here you are kneeling before yet another fireplace, trying to coax a reluctant flame into life. This is your fourth one today, and your patience is wearing as thin as your gloves. The flint strikes, once, twice. Finally, a spark catches. You feed it gently, watching the ember glow to life, the flame trembling like a frightened animal before it strengthens and spreads. It's almost beautiful, the way it grows, a tiny rebellion against a world determined to stay frozen. The masters upstairs will never know what it costs to make this warmth. To them, fire is a symbol of elegance, something to lean beside while sipping tea or reading the morning paper. To you, it's a battle. Every log, every spark is won through aching hands, chapped skin, and hours spent shivering in smoke-filled rooms. Your lungs burn as you breathe in the first curl of coal smoke. You cough once quietly, because servants aren't supposed to sound human. Then you stand, wipe your hands, and move on to the next room. Lighting fires might seem simple, but it's an art. You've learned that too little air starves the flame, but too much wind snuffs it out entirely. Each hearth has its own temperament. The one in the parlor is spoiled. It wants fine wood and steady fanning. The one in the master's study prefers coal, and if you feed it too quickly, it spits smoke like an angry dragon. You've memorized them, all these fickle little gods of warmth. You keep them alive because you must. Down in the kitchen, you can already hear the familiar rhythm of breakfast plates being scrubbed and the clang of the iron range as someone stokes it back to life. You'll return there soon enough, your face smeared with soot and your sleeves damp from melted frost. But for now, you linger a moment by the newly lit fire, letting the faintest trace of heat brush against your palms. It's a luxury you steal in seconds, a sin small enough that no one will notice. Then you hear it, the distant ring of another bell. The mistress is awake. You sigh, softly adjust your apron, and head for the servants' stairwell. The steps are narrow and steep, winding, like a spine through the house's bones. Each one creaks under your weight. The sound of footsteps from above echoes faintly, soft, quick, expensive shoes tapping across warm carpets. It's strange, you think, how two worlds can exist in the same house and yet never truly touch. At the landing, you pass the butler. He gives you one of his looks, cool, precise, wordless. You nod, keep your eyes down, and continue. In the Victorian household hierarchy, he's the emperor of your small frozen kingdom, and his approval means more than comfort ever will. You enter the drawing room to find the mistress sitting by the window, draped in silk, her hands wrapped around a porcelain cup. "Cold morning, isn't it?" she says absently. You smile politely, resisting the urge to laugh. She says it every day, as if she's just discovered winter exists. You murmur something deferential, "Indeed, ma'am," and move to adjust the fire. The flames leap obediently higher. The warmth blooms across the room, chasing away the last of the chill. You can feel it prickling at the back of your neck, a cruel reminder that you're not meant to stay. That will be all she says, and you nod again, stepping away before the heat becomes temptation. Back downstairs, the air hits you like a slap. The corridor feels alive, with drafts, cold whips of air, twisting through the cracks like invisible threads. You pass the laundry room, where steam rises in ghostly plumes from the big copper vats. The laundresses are hard at work, already red-faced and sweating despite the cold, their sleeves rolled up, their arms plunged into scalding water. The heat fogs the air, turning the room into a fever dream of hissing and dripping and scraping. You can barely see through it. "Careful with that sheet," One of them snaps. That's the master's. You mutter an apology and edge around the tubs, the floor slick under your boots. The smell of wet linen and soap stings your nose. Your own laundry, of course, is done in cold water in a basin. No one bothers to scrub clean. You're used to it. Clean is relative down here. By midday, your hands are raw again. You try to stretch them out, flexing your fingers, but they ache too much to move. The skin around your knuckles has cracked, and a small bead of blood stains the cuff of your sleeve. You don't stop. You can't. There are still more fires to feed, more rooms to clean, more stairs to climb. Historians often describe Victorian life as an age of contrasts, opulence and poverty, progress and suffering, elegance and exhaustion. You don't need a historian to tell you that. You live it every day. The rich wear the warmth like a fashion accessory. The poor serve it by the shovelful. When you return to the kitchen, the cook has gone to war with a stubborn roast. The heat from the iron range is thick enough to make the air shimmer, but even here the cold lurks in the corners. You rub your arms trying to keep blood flowing. The younger maids chatter quietly. As they peel vegetables, their voices hushed, but bright. You envy their optimism, their belief that someday they'll leave this place for something better. You stopped believing that long ago. The butler enters clipboard in hand and announces the afternoon duties. There's a special guest tonight, he says, a dinner party for 12. The cook groans softly. You keep your face blank. Dinner parties mean long hours, hot kitchens, and endless trips up and down the stairs. But they also mean one small mercy, more firelight, at least upstairs, more warmth to chase, even if it's never yours to keep. You glance toward the scullery door. Beyond it lies the courtyard, where the stable boys are chopping wood. You can hear the rhythmic thud of the axe through the stone walls. Each swing means another log, another brief hour of heat for people who don't know your name. You wonder if any of them ever think about the hands that carry the wood inside the arms that stack it, the lungs that breathe in the smoke. Probably not. The rich have the luxury of thinking only of comfort. The poor have the duty of making it happen. As the clock strikes 1, you finally allow yourself a small moment beside the kitchen fire. You crouch down, hands outstretched, feeling the sting as blood returns to your fingers. It hurts, but it's the kind of pain you welcome. The cook pretends not to see you. Everyone steals heat when they can. It's an unspoken rule of survival. For a few breaths, you let your mind drift. You imagine what it must be like upstairs right now. Sunlight spilling across carpets, laughter echoing through halls, the scent of coffee and perfume. You picture yourself sitting by one of those grand fireplaces, not as a shadow, but as someone who belongs there. You close your eyes just for a heartbeat. Then someone calls your name. Back to work. Always back to work. You stand, dust off your apron, and step away from the fire. The warmth fades behind you as quickly as it came. The door to the servants' corridor creaks open, and the cold greets you like an old, unwelcome friend. You sigh once softly and start walking again. The house hums around you, alive with its endless frozen heartbeat. Breakfast below stairs was never quite breakfast. It was more like an intermission between bouts of labor. You couldn't call it a meal. When the tea was weak, the bread was hard, and every bite had to be stolen between bells. Still, when you finally sit, it feels like luxury. The table is narrow, scarred by years of knives and spilled gravy, and the benches wobble when anyone shifts their weight. The walls are so close that when the door opens, everyone leans in to make room for the cold to pass. The kitchen clock ticks above the mantel, slow and heavy. Around you, the air hums with exhaustion. Servants eat in silence because words take energy, and energy is currency you can't waste. Every now and then, someone coughs, or the maid beside you sighs as she blows into her hands for warmth. The bread in your fingers crumbles like chalk, and the tea tastes faintly of iron, but you drink it anyway. It's the closest thing you'll get to comfort all day. 3 degrees colder than yesterday, says Thomas, one of the footmen. He says it casually, but his breath fogs in front of him. The scullery maid laughs dryly. 3 degrees colder than hell, you mean? A few people chuckle under their breath. Laughter in this room always feels like rebellion. The cook strides past her apron dusted with flour, muttering to herself about the menu for the evening. Dinner for 12 means 12 chances to fail, and she takes failure personally. No sloppiness, she warns, even though she's not talking to you in particular. Her voice carries through the hall, a reminder that there's no such thing as being off duty, not even for the length of a crust. Your breakfast ends when the bell rings again. The sound slices through the room, shrill and commanding. The butler appears at the door, immaculate, as always, his tone clipped. Parlor fire's out. Someone see to it. You set your cup down and rise. No one speaks. Everyone just moves like parts of a great tired machine. You climb the narrow back stairs once more, your breath loud in the confined space. The coal bucket feels heavier with each step, or maybe you're just colder. The passageways above are quiet now, the hush of wealth settling into place for the day. It's a silence that's both soft and cruel. It erases you without effort. In the parlor, sunlight filters weakly through tall, lace-draped windows. The air smells faintly of wax, and roses, an elegant disguise for damp wood and ash. You kneel, stir the dying embers, and add more coal. The fire catches reluctantly, each flicker struggling to live. Your reflection trembles faintly in the brass fender, warped and pale. You think briefly about the servants who came before you. This house is old enough to remember dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Women who scrubbed until their fingers bled, men who carried coal until their backs gave out, boys who vanished into the city and never came back. The rich upstairs changed with every generation, but the servants below never really left. The cold remembers them all. When the flame finally steadies, you stand and smooth your apron. You're not supposed to linger, but your hands hover near the hearth just close enough to steal a second of warmth. You close your eyes. The heat feels almost human. Then footsteps approach. You step back instantly. The master enters, newspaper in hand, wearing a robe lined with fur. He glances toward you, but doesn't really see you. You might as well be furniture. Drafts back again, he mutters to no one. I swear this house leaks heat like a sieve. He moves toward the window, adjusts the curtain, and the faint smell of frost rushes in. You want to laugh at the irony. He blames the house for cold that you've been fighting since dawn. But you don't laugh. You nod quietly and leave the room. Downstairs again, the kitchen is chaos. The sound of knives against wood pans, scraping spoons clanging. The air is thick with the scent of onions, fat, and smoke. Steam curls from every pot, and yet the corners of the room still breathe frost. There's never enough fire to chase the cold out completely. It just hides in the cracks, waiting. You join the others, scrubbing dishes from the previous meal. The water in the basin is a battlefield, one side boiling, the other freezing. You alternate between burning your hands and numbing them. There's no middle ground, not in this life. Do you ever think the scullery maid asks what it's like to eat upstairs? The question lingers. No one answers. You've all seen the dining room, a cathedral of excess with silver so bright it hurts to look at. You've carried in plates heavy with roast beef and wine-soaked puddings, and you've seen how they laugh while you stand silent in the corner. But thinking about it only makes the cold feel sharper. Best not to wonder, you say softly. She nods. She's young. She'll learn. By midday, the first layer of exhaustion sets in. Your arms ache, your back burns, and your skin feels stretched too tight. The only thing keeping you upright is momentum. You wipe your forehead with your sleeve and glance toward the window. Outside, snow has begun to fall again, fine and steady. It will pile high before evening, which means more work later. Shoveling paths, fetching logs, carrying water that freezes solid before it reaches the bucket. Historians still argue whether servants ever felt pride in their work. You think maybe they did sometimes. There's a rhythm to this labor, a strange satisfaction in the repetition, like a hymn you can't stop singing. You keep the house alive. Without you, the fires die, the floors dull, the meals vanish. Maybe that's something, being the unseen heartbeat of it all. The cook's voice snaps you back. Coal scuttle's empty again, she shouts. You move before she finishes the sentence. Back to the cellar. Down the steps, slick with frost, into the belly of the house where the air tastes of dust and iron. The coal bins loom in the dim light heaps of black rock, glistening faintly. You dig in with the shovel, each scoop echoing like a heartbeat. The dust coats your skin, your clothes, even your eyelashes. By the time you're done, you look like a ghost. When you emerge again, the light outside has dimmed. Afternoon has arrived unnoticed, gray and heavy. You catch a glimpse of yourself in a window pane, your face pale streaked with soot, your hair damp with sweat and fog. You look older than you are. Everyone down here does. Dinner preparations stretch into the evening. The kitchen grows louder, hotter. Steam clings to the ceiling in thick, damp clouds. Somewhere above the piano starts again, its music trickling down through the floor like melted gold. The sound makes your chest ache. Beauty feels cruel when you're too tired to lift your head. At last, the butler calls for the final check. The silver gleams, the dishes shine, the roast is perfect. The bell rings again. You line up with the others, trays in hand, and ascend the stairs. The warmth hits you first, sudden and startling. The dining room is a world apart, glowing with candlelight, laughter, and music. The guests shimmer in silk, and Jules' glasses raised, cheeks flushed. You walk among them silently invisible, carrying the weight of their comfort. The fire behind you roars its heat, caressing the back of your neck. For a brief, forbidden moment, you close your eyes and let it sink in. And then someone calls your name. A glass has been dropped, a mess, to clean, another reminder of where you belong. You kneel, pick up the shards carefully, and when you look up, your reflection glints faintly in the crystal, just enough to remind you this is your world, frozen, glowing endlessly cold. By the time the dinner plates have been cleared and the guests' laughter fades into muffled echoes behind mahogany doors, the house exhales a long, weary sigh. The warmth upstairs will linger for hours, trapped behind velvet curtains and shut doors. But down here in the veins of the manor, the cold rushes back, instantly eager to reclaim its territory. You can feel it crawl along the flagstone floors, winding around your ankles like a living thing. It's late, but your day isn't close to done. The fires you lit this morning are dying one by one, and before you can rest, you have to tend them again. Coal ashes, embers, your constant companions. The other servants are scattered throughout the house like shadows, each one performing some quiet, necessary ritual to keep the illusion of comfort intact. Somewhere, a maid scrubs candle wax from the stair rails. In another corridor, a footman polishes silver by lamplight. The house is never truly asleep. It just dreams while you work. You move through the corridor, lantern in hand, the dim glow barely touching the walls. Every sound feels exaggerated. The crunch of your boots on grit, the creak of old timber, the faint rattle of the wind outside, pressing against the windows. The house is vast, but never empty. It breathes. It shifts. It remembers. The parlor fire is your first stop. You kneel, rake the ashes, and add new coal. The smell of smoke fills your lungs, sharp and familiar. For a moment, as you watch the fire catch, you remember a story. One of the older maids told you your first winter here, that the cold in this place isn't weather, it's history. It's all the years of silence, she'd said. All the words servants never got to say. That's what makes it so cold. You'd laughed at the time, but now you're not so sure. Once the flames are steady, you stand and move on. The next room waits. The next fire is weak. The one after that nearly out. You keep your rhythm. You've learned how to work fast without hurrying, how to breathe through the soot, how to make your body an extension of the routine. Flint, coal, flame, breath. Over and over until it becomes a kind of prayer. When you reach the great hall, you pause to catch your breath. The ceiling arches high above you, disappearing into shadow. Moonlight filters through the tall windows, painting the marble floor in pale streaks. It's quiet here, eerily so. You can hear your own heartbeat. The fire in the grand hearth is nearly dead, reduced to a faint orange pulse beneath a mountain of ash. You kneel, rake it gently, and feed it new life. The firelight climbs up the carved mantel, illuminating portraits of ancestors who watch you with distant, judgmental eyes. Men in uniforms, women in silk, all staring as though you don't belong in their world. Maybe you don't. But you are the reason this world hasn't frozen solid. Without you, their marble smiles would fade into frost. Your stomach growls. You've had nothing since noon, and the smell of burnt tallow makes your mouth water. The kitchen will have leftovers, maybe a bit of bread gone, stale the ends of a pudding, the bone from the roast. If you're lucky, no one will notice if you take it. If you're not well, the butler's punishments are cold in their own way. You move on. Down the passage up another narrow staircase. The air changes subtly as you climb warmer scented faintly with perfume and beeswax. You're entering the family's world again. The light spilling from the drawing room door is soft and golden. You pause at the threshold, waiting to be summoned. Ah, there you are, the mistress says, without looking up. She's seated near the fire embroidery in hand, her shawl draped loosely around her shoulders. The master sits opposite, reading the evening paper, his slippers perfectly aligned before the hearth. The fire crackles merrily between them. Do see to the fire in the blue room, she adds, her tone, mild but dismissive. Yes, ma'am, you whisper, bowing slightly before slipping away. The blue room is her private sitting parlor, a place that smells of lavender and secrets. The fire there has nearly gone out. You kneel again, your knees aching against the stone. As you rebuild the flame, the light flickers across the wallpaper, revealing faint outlines where portraits used to hang. It's strange how much of a house you notice when you're the one keeping it alive. The missing pictures, the scuffed floorboards, the letters forgotten on desks. You see everything, but no one sees you. Historians still argue whether Victorian servants were loyal out of pride or necessity. You think it's neither. Loyalty is just another form of survival. The cold teaches you that better to obey than to freeze. The fire catches beautifully this time. You linger for a second too long, letting your hands hover above the glow. Your skin prickles with pins and needles as warmth seeps in. You know it won't last. It never does. When you finally head back downstairs, the house is quieter. The guests have left. The laughter has died. Only the wind remains brushing against the windows like a whisper. You pass through the servants' hall, where the others are finishing up for the night. The kitchen maids are scrubbing pans, their arms red to the elbow. The butler stands by the ledger, checking numbers with surgical precision. The cook snores softly in her chair, a ladle still clutched in her hand. You want to sit, but there's one last task: the ashes. The master doesn't like to wake to the smell of smoke, so the grates must be cleaned before dawn. You grab the iron shovel and head for the scullery. The air grows colder with every step. Ash clings to your boots, to your apron, to your lungs. When you dump the final pail of gray dust into the bin, outside the night air hits you full force. It's snowing again. Fine dry flakes drift through the courtyard, settling in your hair and lashes. You stand there for a moment, breathing it in. The stars are faint, half hidden by clouds. The moonlight glints off the snow like powdered glass. For the first time all day, the world feels still. No bells, no voices, no orders. Just the quiet hiss of snow meeting stone. You close your eyes and let yourself imagine for one heartbeat that this cold belongs to you. That the air is clean, that the silence means freedom, not absence. Then a door creaks somewhere behind you, and the moment is gone. You step back inside, sealing the winter out, or maybe sealing yourself in. The warmth from the kitchen fire hits you again, dull and smoky. The others have gone to their quarters. The house feels like it's holding its breath. You move through the empty corridors, one last time lantern, swinging at your side. The light trembles, throwing long shadows that twist across the walls. You whisper a quiet goodnight, to no one in particular, to the house maybe, or to the ghosts of all who came before you. Your day ends where it began, before a fire that isn't yours. You kneel, bank the coals under a mound of ash, and watch the glow fade to embers. The trick you've learned is not to smother it completely. If you bury it just right, the fire will survive until morning. It's a fragile thing, that ember so small, so stubborn, kind of like you. By the next morning, your bones ache, as if they've been carrying the weight of the entire manor. Every joint feels stiff, every breath comes out white. You've slept maybe 3 hours, long enough for the frost to form again on the inside of your window. The sheet is stiff, the blanket damp from the cold, and your pillow feels like it's been filled with frozen bread dough. You roll over, hear the faint creak of the floorboards, and know it's time. There's no such thing as sleeping in when you live beneath the stairs. The first bell rings just as your feet hit the floor. Its sound cuts through the still air like a blade. The other servants groan awake, coughing, shivering, some already pulling on boots, with fingers that don't bend easily anymore. The scullery maid mumbles something that sounds like a prayer or a curse. You can't tell which. When you open the door, the hallway greets you with a blast of cold air, so sharp it steals your breath. It smells faintly of damp wool and metal. Somewhere, someone's candle has gone out, leaving the passage in half darkness. You light your own taper and watch the flame tremble like it's afraid to be alive. Your first task today isn't lighting fires, it's hauling coal. The bins ran low last night and the butler doesn't tolerate empty scuttles. So you make your way down to the coal cellar, the lowest, darkest part of the house. The air grows heavier, with each step thick with dust and silence. You can hear the crunch of your boots on gravel and the faint drip of water somewhere behind the walls. The air smells of iron smoke and time. When you reach the bottom, your lantern light flickers across heaps of black stone, glistening like wet glass. You pick up the shovel and start loading the scuttle. Each scoop sends up a cloud of grit that sticks to your skin, your tongue, your eyelashes. Within minutes, you look like a chimney sweep, your breath visible against the dark, like a ghost trying to escape. By the time you climb back up the stairs, your arms burn. The coal bucket digs into your shoulder, the weight uneven, threatening to spill. You move slowly, careful not to slip. One wrong step, and you'll slide all the way back down, breaking more than just the bucket. No one will help you up. They'll just step over you on their way to breakfast. You deliver the first load to the parlor, then the study, then the nursery. Every room feels like a different kind of cold. The nursery has that faint sweetness of stale milk and lavender. The study smells of tobacco and damp paper. The parlor roses. Always roses, as if the flowers could hide the frost. You know these scents better than you know your own reflection. In the nursery, the governess is already awake, bundled in shawls, scolding the little boy for leaving his toys scattered across the rug. You crouch near the hearth shovel in hand, trying to stay invisible. The child watches you quietly curious, his small face pale in the half-light. "Is it very cold down there where you sleep?" he asks suddenly. The governess snaps her fingers. "Don't bother the staff." You smile faintly and say nothing. But inside, the question lingers like warmth. Someone noticed. Once the fires are burning, you move to the laundry room to fetch water. The outdoor pump is frozen again. You have to break the ice with an iron rod, each strike echoing through the courtyard like a gunshot. Shards of frost splash your face. Your hands go numb before you're halfway done. By the time you fill the buckets, your fingers have lost all color and you can't tell whether you're holding the handle or it's holding you. Back inside the kitchen is already roaring to life. Steam spills from pots colliding with cold air to form ghostly clouds that hang in the rafters. The cook barks orders over the clatter of metal. "You there, get the eggs. And don't dawdle, I can see you thinking." Her voice is a constant presence, like the ticking of the clock, irritating, predictable, somehow comforting. You set the buckets down by the stove, flex your fingers, and glance toward the high window. Snow is falling again, fine and endless. The garden outside is buried now, a smooth white plain where even the hedges have vanished. The world feels small, trapped inside this house of drafts and smoke. At least the kitchen is warm. The great iron range glows like a beast's heart, red hot and alive. But the warmth doesn't last long. It's greedy. It only loves those close enough to serve it. You take your moment anyway. You lean near the stove, hands outstretched, your skin tingling painfully as heat seeps in. It's almost too much, like touching sunlight after years in shadow. "Don't stand there dreaming," the cook says. You straighten, mutter an apology, and return to work. The potatoes need peeling, the pots need scrubbing, the silver must shine. Everything must be ready for the family's breakfast porridge, with cream toast, with marmalade eggs, soft boiled to precise seconds. You watch the plates being arranged, knowing that none of it will ever reach your tongue. By the time the first bell rings for breakfast upstairs, the kitchen smells of butter and smoke. You carry the trays through the narrow passage, careful not to spill a drop. The warmth of the kitchen fades behind you. The corridor ahead is cold enough to bite. You balance the tray, push open the door to the dining room, and step into another world. Here, everything glows. Candles flicker against golden frames. The table gleams with polished silver and crisp linens. The master reads his newspaper, one hand resting on a cup of steaming tea. The mistress smiles faintly as the children chatter. Their laughter fills the room like music. You stand by the door, silent, waiting for a signal. "Hot water," she says, finally not looking at you. You move instantly, pour carefully, and step back. The tea steams, filling the air with warmth. You can only breathe but never feel. When the meal ends, you clear the plates. You move quickly, quietly balancing trays heavy enough to make your arms tremble. The butler nods at you once in approval, a rare reward that almost feels like kindness. Back downstairs, the kitchen looks different now. The chaos has calmed. The cook sits wiping her brow, muttering about supply lists. The air still smells of toast, but the warmth has begun to fade again. You glance toward the hearth, where a few coals still glow, and wonder how long before they die too. Historians like to write about the grand inventions of the Victorian age: trains, telegraphs, gaslights. But they never mention the people who kept those lights burning. The servants, the maids, the unseen hands that made progress look effortless. You think of that sometimes as you scrub, polish, lift, and haul. You think of how history remembers inventions but forgets endurance. When you finally sit again for your own breakfast hours, after the family has eaten, the tea is cold, the bread is dry, but you're too tired to care. You chew slowly, staring into the dim firelight, and for the first time all morning you let your mind wander. Maybe one day you tell yourself things will change. Maybe someday warmth won't belong only to the rich. Then the bell rings again. You stand, pick up your apron, and head for the stairs. The cold rushes to meet you like an old friend. There are certain truths in a Victorian household: fire rises, warmth costs, and servants shiver in silence. You've known this for so long that it no longer feels unfair. It just is, like gravity or the cold itself. Upstairs, the fire burns high enough to make the walls glow. Downstairs, the air bites through every layer of wool you own. It's almost poetic how heat always climbs away from the people who need it most. You move quietly through the servants' corridor, balancing a tray of coal on your hip. The walls here are narrow and damp, and the draft never stops. It comes through cracks in the plaster, seeps beneath doors, whistles down stairwells. You've stuffed rags into every gap, hung blankets over the worst leaks, even placed bricks in front of the worst door frames, but the wind always finds a way in. The old maids say it's alive this cold, a spirit that feeds on breath and fatigue. By the time you reach the kitchen, your knuckles have gone white from gripping the tray. You set it down by the hearth and rub your hands together, trying to coax some feeling back. The cook stands nearby, face flushed, sleeves rolled high, her arms buried elbow deep in dough. "Cold again, is it?" she asks, not looking up. You give a half smile. "It's always cold." That's not news. It's the weather of your life. The kitchen is the closest thing you have to warmth, though it's more smoke than comfort. The iron range roars in the corner, radiating heat that never seems to spread far. You can feel the fire on one side of your face and the chill gnawing at the other. It's a strange kind of balance, half living, half frozen. You pull a kettle from the hook and pour water into the basin, the steam clouding around your face. For a moment, it feels like breathing warmth itself. Then comes the butler's voice, deep and deliberate. "Servants' hallway is drafty again. Close the east doors after deliveries." You nod, though he isn't speaking directly to you. The butler doesn't lower himself to address one servant unless necessary. His words are meant for the room, and you happen to be in it. You slip past him with the kettle, careful not to brush against his coat. His authority hangs in the air, thicker than the smoke. The east corridor is the coldest part of the manor, where the delivery doors lead straight to the outside courtyard. You open the door, and winter hits you like a slap. The snow has thickened overnight sheets of white pressed against the ground, piled on barrels and railings. Your breath fogs instantly. You push the door shut again, but the latch doesn't hold. The wind forces it open a crack, whistling through the seam like a ghost's sigh. "Stay shut," you mutter, jamming an iron poker across the handle. It's useless, of course. The cold will come through anyway, creeping under the wood and licking at the floor. By the time you return to the kitchen, your hands have gone numb again. You warm them by the stove, but there's no time to linger. The morning duties are piling up. The laundry needs hanging, the fires upstairs must be checked, and the mistress's room requires fresh air, which is Victorian code for open the windows and die a little inside. You head to the mistress's room first. The fire there has burned low, leaving a faint sour smell of wet coal. You kneel, add more fuel, and fan it gently until the flame revives. The mistress herself is by the window wrapped in shawls, gazing out over the snow. "It's beautiful," she murmurs more to herself than to you. Like a painting. You glance up at her reflection in the glass. Her cheeks flushed from warmth, not wind. "Yes, ma'am," you say softly, though the view looks more like a graveyard to you. She turns suddenly. "Oh, and do fetch some ice from the courtyard. The doctor says it's good for the complexion." You hesitate. Ice for her skin, warmth for her comfort, frostbite for yours. You nod and curtsy. "Of course, ma'am." The irony tastes bitter, all the way down to your lungs. In the courtyard, the snow crunches under your boots, the sound sharp and hollow. The pump stands frozen solid again, its iron handle glittering with frost. You chip at the ice barrel with a chisel, each strike sending up little shards that sting your face. When you finally pry a block loose, it slips from your grip and crashes to the ground, splitting into jagged pieces. You gather what you can, your fingers burning red with cold. Back inside, the difference in temperature feels almost painful. Your skin tingles, your ears buzz. You drop the ice into the kitchen basin, and the sound echoes like breaking glass. The cook eyes you sympathetically. "You'll lose a finger one of these days," she mutters. You grin weakly. "Then I'll just stir with the other 9. Historians still argue whether servants like you complained or simply endured. They talk of loyalty, devotion, duty, as if those were choices instead of necessities. The truth is simpler. You work because you must, because the alternative is starvation. And in winter, that alternative feels close enough to reach out and touch. By midday, the wind picks up. It howls down, chimneys rattles the windows, presses against the house like it's trying to get in or remind you it already has. You're sent to fetch wood from the shed, a trek across the courtyard that feels more like an expedition to the Arctic. The snow drifts high against the walls, and the shed door is half buried. You push it open, breath steaming eyes, watering from the cold. Inside, the air smells of damp bark and sawdust. You stack the logs quickly, each one heavier than it looks, and haul them back one armful at a time. The butler catches you, returning eyes flicking to the wet stains on your sleeves. "Don't drip on the rugs," he says sharply. You nod again, though part of you wants to laugh. Rugs, coal, fires, ice, it's all a balance of contradictions. Everything warm here exists because someone froze for it. Later, when the house finally settles into its afternoon quiet, you stop by the scullery for a brief moment of stillness. The air is thick, with the smell of soap and ash, the sound of dripping water from thawing ice. You sit on the edge of the wooden counter, fingers curled around a chipped mug of tea. It's lukewarm, but that's still something. Outside, the snow has slowed. Pale light filters through the small window, painting faint patterns on the floor. You trace one with your finger absently. For a fleeting second, you think you hear something. Maybe laughter, maybe wind. Then the bell rings again, sharp and relentless. You stand, set the mug aside, and pull your shawl tighter. There's a new task waiting. There always is. You pass the mirror near the hall, and for once you pause. The reflection that looks back at you isn't the polished, invisible servant they expect. It's someone gray around the edges, eyes shadowed, cheeks raw. Someone made of smoke and frost. Still, you smile at her, a tired, small smile that feels almost defiant. You may be invisible upstairs, but down here in the belly of the cold, you are the one who keeps the house alive. The next draft of air snakes through the corridor, and you move again, candle flickering as you walk. The wax drips onto your hand, hot against your skin. You don't even flinch. After all, it's the only kind of warmth that belongs to you. Laundry day. Two words that could freeze the soul of any servant faster than a January wind. It's early, far too early, and the scullery is already alive with the hiss of boiling water and the dull thud of wooden paddles against wet cloth. The air is thick, heavy, and damp steam clings to the walls, mixes with soot, and settles into your hair until every strand feels weighed down with fatigue. The warmth here isn't comfort. It's punishment wrapped in vapor. You pull another sheet from the basin, the linen, pale and stiff. It's heavy with water, so cold it feels alive. You wring it out as best you can, twisting until your wrists ache. The drops hit the stone floor, hissing against the few stray embers that drifted from the stove. "Keep up, girl," the laundress barks over the din voice, hoarse from years of breathing soap fumes. "There's 20 more in the pile, and the mistress wants them back before supper." You nod without answering. Talking wastes breath, and every breath here already tastes of ash and lime. The lye soap burns tiny cracks into your skin. They sting when the water hits them. Small reminders that even in warmth, the cold still owns you. Steam fills your lungs thick and choking. You can't tell whether you're sweating or freezing anymore. Someone opens a door, and the draft slices through the room like a blade, turning the fog into icy mist. Everyone groans. The cook shouts for the door to be closed. It slams shut again, but the cold remains lingering like guilt. When the last batch of sheets is scrubbed and rinsed, you carry them outside to hang. The courtyard greets you with a blinding sheet of white. The air is so cold, it steals the moisture from your breath before you can exhale. The ground crunches beneath your boots, a mix of frost and frozen mud. You hang the linen one piece at a time, fingers numb, clothespins slipping through your gloves. The sheets freeze within minutes, stiff as planks. They snap in the wind, cracking like whips. From a distance, they almost look beautiful. Rows of white banners fluttering against a gray sky. But beauty doesn't make your knuckles stop bleeding. You pause, flex your fingers, and breathe into your palms for warmth. The air stings your lips, your nose, your eyes. Everything burns. A voice calls from the doorway. "Don't linger. We need the irons hot." You nod, teeth chattering, and return inside. Back in the laundry, the irons glow faintly red, lined up along the range like obedient soldiers. Each one weighs more than a newborn child. You test them carefully, flicking a drop of water onto the base. It hisses instantly. Good. You grab a cloth, wrap it around the handle, and begin pressing the frozen sheets flat. The scent of singed fabric fills the air. Ironing is another kind of war. Too little heat, and the wrinkles stay. Too much, and you scorch the fabric, earning a scolding that burns worse than the iron itself. You move in rhythm, lift, press, slide, repeat. Steam rises from the table, curling around your face. It feels almost like fog from a dream. The laundress hums a hymn under her breath, something slow and mournful. You join in softly, your voice cracking from dryness. Historians still debate whether servants like you found peace in this work. Some claim the rhythm was meditative, a kind of domestic prayer. You don't know about peace, but there is rhythm, steady, relentless, comforting in its predictability. The iron hums, the steam sighs, the fabric softens. It's one of the few moments in your day that makes sense. When the sheets are done, you fold them carefully, stacking them on the wooden table until the pile reaches your chin. The laundress inspects each one with the sharp eye of a general. "Good work," she says, finally, almost grudgingly. The words are rare enough to warm you for a moment. You carry the stack upstairs, balancing it against your chest. The stairwell feels colder than ever. Each breath forms a puff of mist that floats upward toward ceilings you'll never touch. On the landing, you pause, shifting the weight in your arms. The mistress passes by, perfumed and radiant, wrapped in layers of fur. She glances at you, smiles faintly. "How efficient you all are," she says. "The linens smell lovely." "Thank you, ma'am." Your voice is steady, polite, and hollow. The compliment passes through you like air. Once the sheets are delivered, you return to the servants' quarters for a brief pause, a few stolen minutes before the next set of orders arrive. The other maids are sitting close to the wall, sharing a pot of tea gone lukewarm. Someone jokes that the tea's so weak, it might be better to just lick the cup. Laughter bubbles up, tired, but real. It fills the little room, echoing off the low ceiling, like the sound of something fragile, refusing to die. You join them, sinking onto the bench. Your muscles scream in protest. Your hands are red, and raw fingertips split in thin lines. You wrap them in a rag and press your palms against the cup to feel even a hint of heat. It's barely there, but you cling to it. Outside, the wind howls against the walls. The fire in the small stove sputters, throwing weak light onto the brick floor. The oldest servant, Mrs. Hobbs, looks up from her darning. "Storm's coming," she says. "You can smell it." You can. The air carries that faint metallic taste, the promise of more snow, more work, more cold. No one says anything. What's there to say? Eventually, the bell rings again. Always the bell. Always that sound. You rise, shoulders heavy, and head for the stairs. The corridor feels longer tonight. The candles have burned low, their light flickering along the walls like fading stars. You think of the frozen linens outside, still hanging, still stiff, waiting for morning. You envy them in a strange way. They get to rest. Upstairs, the family is laughing again. You hear it before you see them, the sharp, bright sound of people who've never known real cold. You pause at the door, listening. It's a cheerful kind of cruelty. You press your hand against the polished wood of the dining room door and feel the faint warmth from the fire seep through. Just enough to sting. When you step inside, your breath catches. The fire blazes high, reflected in the crystal glasses and gold-trimmed plates. The smell of roasted meat fills the air. You stand by the wall waiting for instructions, the heat caressing your face. It's too much, almost painful after a day spent in frost. You'd forgotten what it felt like to be hot. The mistress laughs, head tilted back. The master pours more wine. Someone remarks how lovely the fire looks tonight. You glance at it. The same fire you built this morning with wood you carried through snow with hands that still haven't healed. For a moment, you allow yourself a private thought. If only they knew how much of you burns in that fire. But you swallow it down. Servants don't think like that. Servants don't burn. They endure. You stand straight expression, calm, invisible once again. The warmth, the laughter, the light, they'll all fade by morning. But the cold always stays. The kitchen never truly sleeps. Even long after the family has gone to bed, the embers in the great iron range still glow like tired eyes that refuse to close. The smell of roasted fat, onions, and ashes lingers thickly in the air, a mixture of comfort and exhaustion. This is where you live most of your life, between smoke and silence, half warm, half frozen, entirely unseen. You start your morning as always with the same ritual. Scrape the pans, scrub the pots, and clean the floor until the stone looks like wet slate. It's not even dawn yet, and already the kitchen hums with quiet urgency. The cook barks instructions over the rattle of metal. Don't just stand there, child. The porridge won't stir itself. You hurry, ladle in hand, stirring the thick bubbling mass that clings to the pot like glue. The wooden spoon feels heavy, and your arms ache from yesterday's endless labor. But there's no time for soreness. The heat from the range blasts your face, while the rest of your body trembles in the draft creeping under the door. It's a strange contradiction. You've grown used to burning cheeks, frozen feet. You pull your shawl tighter, feeling the damp fabric cling to your skin. The world above might be wrapped in quilts and comfort. But down here, heat is a privilege you borrow from the food. On the table beside you, loaves of bread rest under linen cloths, rising slowly in the faint warmth. You watch them for a second, yeast, breathing dough, expanding alive in a way you envy. When the cook isn't looking, you sneak a piece from one of the ends. It's raw, and sticky, but you chew it anyway. Hunger doesn't care for etiquette. The bell rings upstairs, faint but sharp. The first call of the day. The master will want his morning tea strong and dark, precisely 3 lumps of sugar. You grab the tray, pour the steaming liquid into the porcelain cup, and steady your hands as you walk. The hallway beyond the kitchen is cold enough to sting your lungs. Steam rises from the cup, ghosting upward like something trying to escape. You envy it. The butler passes you on the stairs, giving a curt nod. "Mind your balance," he says. His voice is quiet, but carries the weight of command. You nod back, clutching the tray tighter. The steps are narrow and polished, slick from years of wax. The smell of furniture, polish, and smoke clings to the air. Each step feels like a gamble you've fallen once before, and the memory of porcelain shattering against marble still wakes you sometimes at night. You reach the master's study without incident. He's already awake, seated by the fire in his dressing gown, a paper spread before him. The room glows with lamplight, golden and soft. You feel your face warm instantly, your skin prickling with the sudden contrast. "Set it there," he murmurs. Without looking up, you do as told, hands, steady head bowed. The fire crackles beside him, steady and strong. Its warmth touches your arm just barely, and you let yourself feel it for the smallest fraction of a moment before you step back. He turns a page of his paper, muttering something about the weather. Snow again. Britain's winters are getting worse. We'll need more coal this year. You want to laugh at the understatement. More coal means more of you. More hours, more cold, more ash under your nails. But you don't speak. Servants don't answer the weather. You curtsy and retreat quietly. Back in the kitchen, the cook is in full command now, issuing orders like a general preparing for battle. Breakfast must be ready for the entire household: eggs, for the master toast, for the mistress porridge, for the children, and a dozen other small details that seem impossible to keep track of, but somehow must be perfect. "Careful with that plate," she snaps. "And mind the sausages. They're for the upper table, not us." The smell of sizzling fat fills the air. It's the kind of smell that should make your stomach growl, but hunger here feels like something distant, almost theoretical. You get used to the ache, until it stops feeling like an ache at all. The scullery maid, her cheeks flushed from scrubbing, leans close to whisper, "Do you think they ever get cold up there?" You glance toward the ceiling, as if you could see through the floors. "Not like we do," you whisper back. Their cold stops at discomfort. Ours starts there. She nods silently and returns to her washing her reflection, shimmering faintly in the water. As the plates go out one by one, the kitchen briefly falls quiet. You stand by the fire again, rubbing your hands. The heat is rough, uneven, but it feels like something alive. You can almost believe it's a friend. Almost. Then the cook sighs a deep, weary sound, and you know the piece is over. "Coal's low again," she mutters. "Fetch another scuttle before it burns out. And be quick about it, I'm not freezing for anyone." You grab the iron bucket and head down the back steps to the cellar. The descent feels endless, the air growing colder with each step. The walls are slick with condensation, the light from your lantern bouncing weakly off damp stone. When you reach the bottom, the smell of coal dust hits you full force. It's sharp, gritty, familiar. You dig the shovel into the heap, the metal scraping against rock, and fill the bucket until it's nearly too heavy to lift. On your way back up, you pause halfway to catch your breath. Your arm trembles under the weight, your shoulder throbs. You stare at the faint outline of your breath in the lantern glow and think about the irony: you're carrying warmth in your hands, but will never get to keep it. Historians often write that Victorian servants were well-trained and efficient. They never mention what it cost to be either. Efficiency is bruised, shoulders, raw fingers, cracked skin that never heals. Training is silence, learning to swallow your words, your pain, yourself. When you finally return to the kitchen, the cook grumbles, but takes the coal without thanks. You're too tired to care. The fire roars back to life, and you feel a brief wave of pride. There it is, proof that you've done something right, something that matters, even if no one says it aloud. You lean against the counter, closing your eyes for a second. The sound of the fire fills your head, a low hum like a heartbeat. It's beautiful in a way, primitive, steady, alive. You remember something your mother once said when you were small before the workhouses, before this life. A fire is a promise. It says the night will end. You want to believe that. You really do. But the bell rings again. Always the bell. You open your eyes, take a breath, and straighten your back. The scullery maid passes you a rag to wipe your hands. You thank her, then grab another tray tea for the mistress this time, and start back up the stairs. The warmth fades behind you with every step until the house feels cold again like always. You glance toward a high window as you climb. Snow is falling outside, gentle and endless. The flakes drift down like ash from a dying fire. And you think for just a moment how beautiful it is to burn for someone else's comfort. Upstairs, the day glows golden. Downstairs, it dies in gray. That's the rule of this house, and every Victorian house like it. The masters wake to light music and tea. The servants wake to bells, frost, and silence. You've learned not to take it personally. The walls simply know their hierarchy. Heat climbs upward. Cold stays loyal to the ground. When you reach the upper hallway, you can already hear the soft rhythm of the piano coming from the drawing room. A waltz, delicate and slow, drifting through the air like perfume. You stop for a moment, tray balanced on your hands, and listen. The notes are so warm, so alive, that they almost feel like sunlight on your face. Then a voice breaks through the melody. You there, don't loiter. The butler. Of course. You lower your eyes and continue forward. The mistress is entertaining guests this morning, which means every room must look effortless. Fires, blazing curtains opened, just so not a speck of ash or dust to betray the labor beneath the surface. You set the tray of tea on a side table curtsy and begin tending the fire. It's bright already, but she likes it to roar, for atmosphere, she says. You feed the flames with practiced precision, each log placed just right to please the eye. The guests murmur approvingly. One woman dressed in layers of silk that would cost your yearly wage sighs contentedly. Isn't it cozy in here, she says. You smile politely, though you can feel the sweat collecting under your collar. If you could speak honestly, you'd tell her that cozy is a luxury built on someone else's frostbitten hands. That warmth in this world is never shared. It's redistributed upward, like wealth, like comfort. But you just nod and say, yes, ma'am. When you finish, the mistress waves a hand without looking up. That will be all. You leave quietly, closing the door behind you, and the laughter resumes, instantly muffled by the thick velvet walls. The corridor beyond feels like a grave. Cold, still airless. It's strange how silence can feel heavier than noise. You walk faster, your steps echoing on the wooden floor. The smell of coal dust follows you everywhere, a scent you can never quite wash away. Downstairs again, the light fades into shadow. The kitchen hums with activity, the cook in full voice as she directs the younger maids. More flour, less talking, she barks. You slip past them toward the pantry, where the air is cooler and the shelves stretch high above your head. You stack jars, polish glass count preserves. The quiet rhythm of the work steadies you. Sometimes you wonder if the house itself listens. If the walls remember all the whispered complaints, the silent tears, the prayers muttered into dishwater. Maybe that's why they creak at night, old voices trying to be heard. When the morning rush fades, the servants' hall finally grows still. You sit for a moment, just long enough to take a breath. Across the table, the scullery maid rubs her wrists, the skin red and raw from scrubbing. They've lit the big fire upstairs again, she says softly. The one in the master's study. I could feel it through the floor. You nod. You always can. The warmth above doesn't just stay upstairs. It seeps faintly through the ceiling, a ghost of heat brushing the top of your head, while the rest of you stays frozen. It's like standing beneath heaven, close enough to feel its glow but never allowed inside. The old footman, Thomas, chuckles dryly. You get used to it, he says, breaking off a crust of bread. Spent 30 winters in service. At some point, you stop feeling the cold. You glance at his hands. Gnarled, scarred fingers, swollen from years of frostbite. He's lying, You can see it in the way he flexes his fingers every few seconds, as if reminding them they're still attached. After a few quiet minutes, the butler enters. Conversation stops instantly. Her ladyship wants the dining room prepared for luncheon. He says, his tone clipped and efficient. Silver-polished fires checked. Move. The piece shatters like glass. Everyone scatters to their tasks. You grab the basket of kindling and head upstairs again. The dining room is a cathedral of sunlight and polish. The windows stretch tall and clear, and the long mahogany table gleams under the chandelier. The fire is already burning low, so you kneel and add more wood, the same way you've done 1,000 times before. Your reflection flickers faintly in the brass fender, distorted by flame. You almost don't recognize yourself, face smudged with soot eyes too tired for your age. Behind you, the mistress's voice floats through the air. More flowers, I think. Yes, by the window. Oh, and fetch some ice for the water jug. Ice. Always ice. You smile bitterly. Upstairs, ice is decoration. Downstairs, it's survival. You finish with the fire and move toward the table, adjusting the silver until it catches the light just right. It's beautiful, really. Everything here is. The perfection of it all makes you ache. You remember being small, pressing your nose against the window of a bakery, staring at pastries you couldn't afford. This feels the same, close enough to touch, but never yours. As the family enters, you step aside, bowing your head. The smell of food fills the room. Roast beef potatoes, rich gravy. You've spent the entire morning cooking it, and now you stand 3 feet away while others eat. It's a strange kind of torture, one that comes wrapped in civility and porcelain plates. Historians still argue whether Victorian servants were happy. They quote letters about loyalty and gratitude, about knowing one's place. But they never quote the silence between those lines, the quiet resignation of people too cold, too tired, or too afraid to say otherwise. When the meal ends, you clear the plates, careful not to make a sound. A stray piece of potato sticks to the edge of one dish, and you hesitate. Hunger whispers in your stomach. You glance around, then scrape it with your thumb and slip it into your mouth. It's cold, but it tastes like rebellion. Downstairs again, you dump the dishes into the sink, the water gray and greasy. You scrub without thinking, lost in the rhythm. Outside, the wind has picked up. You can hear it moaning faintly through the cracks, brushing against the windows like a pleading hand. The cook sits in her chair, rubbing her knees. "Storm's coming," she says quietly. You can feel it in the floor. You can feel it too. The cold presses closer every night now. The fires will burn longer, the work will grow harder, and your bones will ache deeper. But you'll keep moving, because that's what you do. That's what you've always done. Later, when the day ends and the fires upstairs die down to embers, you'll bank the coals again, sweeping ashes into neat piles, listening to the wind outside, and wondering if it's possible for cold to have a memory. If it can, this house must be full of them. You rise from your chair, pull your shawl tighter, and reach for the poker. Another fire is waiting, another flame to feed, another hour to endure, and the cold patient, as ever, will follow you there. Night comes quietly in a house like this. No sudden darkness, no warning, just a slow fading of gold to gray to blue, blue to black. One by one, the lamps are lit in the upper floors, while the lower ones sink back into shadow. The faint scent of oil and smoke fills the corridors as you move with a candle in hand, guiding your own small flame through the maze of silence. The day has been long laundry, fires, meals, endless errands that blur into one another until time stops feeling real. You think it's Tuesday, but it might be Thursday. You can't tell anymore. The only clocks you trust are the bells. They tell you when to start, when to serve, when to stop, pretending the day will ever belong to you. Now the house above is settling into comfort. The family gathers around the drawing room, fire their laughter, muffled by carpets and heavy doors. You can smell roast chestnuts, hear the soft pop of the logs. The warmth doesn't reach you, but the sound of it does. It's strange how happiness can echo like that, felt but never touched. Downstairs, the servants move slower now. The clatter of the day has given way to weary, shuffling, soft mutters, the clink of spoons against mugs of weak tea. The cook snores faintly in her chair apron, still dusted with flour. The scullery maid sits on the floor nodding off as she polishes the last of the silver. Her hands are red and raw, her eyelids trembling with exhaustion. You gently take the cloth from her fingers. "Go on off with you," you whisper. "I'll finish this." She blinks grateful, but too tired to argue. The silver gleams under your rag, catching the candlelight in ripples. You can see your reflection bending and breaking across its surface. 100 fragments of yourself, none of them whole. You remember reading somewhere, maybe on an old newspaper, rapping that silver reflects truth. You wonder what truth it sees in you. A cold draft sneaks under the kitchen door, and you shiver. You move to the hearth where a few dying coals still glow faintly. You stir them with the poker, trying to coax one more breath of heat from their tired embers. It's a small, stubborn light, and you love it for that. The bell rings upstairs, once sharp and clear. You straighten immediately. It's late for calls, which means something's wrong. You grab your apron, wipe your hands, and hurry up the back stairs. The master's study door stands ajar, the light inside flickering. He's pacing near the fire, muttering under his breath, a half-drunk glass of brandy in one hand. "Where's Thomas?" he snaps when you appear. "Downstairs, sir." He's then fetched the bloody decanter yourself. You bow quickly. "Yes, sir." As you cross to the sideboard, you feel the heat of the fire brush your skin. It's roaring now, too strong for the size of the room. The air tastes thick, smoky, almost metallic. You pour the brandy, carefully aware of his eyes on you. He's not cruel exactly, but something in him shifts when the temperature drops. All of them shift. The cold makes them restless, irritable, unpredictable. You've seen it before, the way winter turns, even the gentlest masters sharp around the edges. He takes the glass without thanks, sinks into the chair by the fire, and sighs. The pipes are frozen again. Damn, this weather. "Yes, sir. Tell the cook to have water boiled for washing tomorrow. Early. And see that the servants' fires don't burn through too much coal. It's expensive." You nod, biting back the smile that wants to come. They never see the irony, complaining of frost while rationing the only thing keeping you alive. "Of course, sir." He waves a dismissive hand. "That will be all." You retreat quietly, closing the door behind you. The warmth vanishes the moment it clicks shut. The hallway feels colder than ever, as if the house itself resents your intrusion into the upper world. Back downstairs, the others are finishing their tea. The air smells faintly of smoke and stale bread. The butler appears, his voice low but firm. "Lights out in the kitchen within the hour," he says. "And remember, the fires are to be banked before bed." "Yes, sir." You wait until he leaves, then slip into the corridor that leads to the back stairs. The candle trembles in your hand as you climb. The servants' quarters are colder than the rest of the house. Thin walls, thinner blankets. The floor creaks underfoot, a sound that feels both lonely and familiar. In your room, the air bites. You can see your breath when you exhale. The small window above your bed has frosted over completely, the glass patterned like cracked porcelain. You sit on the edge of your straw mattress and rub your arms, trying to summon warmth that isn't there. The blanket smells faintly of smoke and old soap. You pull it around your shoulders and listen to the wind outside. It moans against the roof, a hollow, endless sound that fills the silence until it almost feels alive. You strike a match and light the stub of a candle. The flame flickers weakly, painting the walls in gold. You stare at it, mesmerized. There's something sacred about this little light, this fragile defiance against the dark. Historians still debate whether servants dreamed of escape or simply endured their lives. You think about that sometimes, how dreams can feel dangerous when you're tired enough to mistake them for rebellion. Still, the thought creeps in. You imagine yourself far from this place somewhere with sun, maybe by the sea, where warmth isn't earned by suffering. You've never seen the sea, but you've heard it's vast and loud and endless. You like the idea of that. Endless warmth, endless air, endless you. The candle flickers lower, snapping you back to reality. The wind howls again, and something thuds in the corridor. A loose shutter, maybe, or a door not properly latched. You grab your shawl and step outside to check. The hall is dark, except for the faint glow from the other rooms. You pass the scullery maid's door and hear soft snoring. The next room is silent. The last one, empty now, since Clara fell ill last week and was sent away to her family. No one has said if she'll return. You doubt it. People disappear quietly in service, like matches burning out. When you return to your room, the candle has nearly melted. You blow it out and crawl beneath the blanket. The mattress rustles with every movement, the straw pressing against your back through the thin sheet. You curl into yourself, drawing your knees close, tucking your cold feet under the hem of your dress. Your breath fogs in the dark. You stare at the ceiling and imagine the fire upstairs, how it must look golden and bright, spilling warmth across silk carpets and polished brass. You wonder if any of it will still be burning by morning. You wonder, too, how many fires in this house have been built by hands that never got to enjoy them. Sleep comes slow, half dreaming, half listening to the heartbeat of the house, the creak of beams, the whisper of wind, the distant hum of laughter above. You drift between worlds, between warmth and cold, between who you are and who you might have been. And when the first bell rings again, thin and metallic, cutting through your half-dream, you open your eyes to darkness that hasn't changed. Another day begins, another fire to build, another ember to protect that isn't your own. You sit up slowly, the blanket sliding off your shoulders, and the air stings your skin like needles. You take a deep breath, steady yourself, and whisper into the cold, "All right then." Then you stand, because that's what you do. The bell rings again, the same shrill note that starts every day, but this time it feels heavier, like the sound has weight pressing down on your chest before you even sit up. You pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders and try to blink the sleep from your eyes. Your throat feels dry, your breath fogs in the air, and the air smells faintly of ashes and cold soap. You stretch your fingers and wince at the stiffness. Every joint feels older than you are. You light your candle with trembling hands. The small flame flickers, weakly painting your narrow room in gold and shadow. Frost glitters on the walls in tiny constellations. You run your palm over the surface, feeling how the damp has turned to ice overnight. The glass of the window is opaque with frozen breath. You can't see the world outside, but you can feel it, a wind moving just beyond the wall, whispering in long, thin moans. You sit for a moment, trying to summon the will to stand. Your bones argue against it. Your heart joins them, but the bell rings again, sharper this time, and that's that. You dress quickly, the fabric cold enough to sting your skin. Wool stockings, apron cap. You've learned to move fast before the chill can settle into your fingers. Down the corridor, other doors are opening. You hear footsteps, low coughs, the rustle of skirts. Someone curses softly. Another laughs, the sound brittle as glass. These are the people who share your life, though you rarely share words. Fatigue makes conversation an extravagance few can afford. You meet in silence, move in unison, like parts of a single shivering body. In the kitchen, the air is damp and heavy, with the ghost of last night's fire. The range is black and cold, the ashes from yesterday still warm beneath the grate. You kneel and begin to clean it out. The soot clings to your skin, staining the cracks in your hands. You breathe through your sleeve to avoid the dust, but it still finds its way into your lungs, dry and sharp. Once the ashes are cleared, you feed the range new coal, stacking it carefully like an altar offering. You strike the flint spark once, twice again. The first hint of orange glows between the black stones, and for a moment it feels like magic. The heat spreads slowly, creeping into the corners of the room like a cautious animal. The cook appears, rubbing her eyes. "Good," she mutters, her voice hoarse. "Get the kettle on. We've a full breakfast to prepare, and the mistress wants scones today." She glances toward the frost-rimmed window. "Heaven help us if the cream freezes before we use it." You nod and set to work. The rhythm returns easily. Kettle on dough, kneaded eggs cracked. The motions are automatic, learned long ago, until they became reflex. The kitchen hums to life again, filled with the steady clatter of pans and the hiss of steam. The others file in yawning shuffling, already half lost to the machinery of the morning. The scullery maid hums under her breath as she washes dishes in the basin, her hands red from the cold. You recognize the tune, it's a lullaby one you think your mother might have sung when you were small. It's strange, hearing something so tender in a place like this. You join in softly, and for a brief, impossible moment, the kitchen feels almost warm. Then the butler enters crisp and immaculate, as always cutting through the haze of steam like a blade. The master's fire has gone out again, he says curtly. See to it immediately. And mind the rug last time you left soot. You wipe your hands and grab the coal scuttle. Yes, sir. The back stairs feel narrower in the morning. You climb quickly, the metal of the bucket pressing cold against your hip. The house above is quiet still, the kind of silence that feels staged. The portraits on the walls watch you as you pass their painted eyes, calm and cruel. In the master's study, the air is thick with the scent of stale smoke and brandy. The fire has indeed gone out. The grate is a bed of gray dust, faint traces of orange buried deep within. You kneel and begin to rebuild it, careful not to disturb the rugs or scatter ash. When the flame catches, you lean closer for just a heartbeat, letting the heat kiss your face. Then the master stirs in his chair, half awake, and you pull back instantly. He mutters something about the weather, how dreadful, how unrelenting, and you murmur in agreement before slipping away. You pause at the top of the stairs. Through the tall windows, the world glows white. Snow drifts lazily through the morning air, soft and endless. It's beautiful, in the cruel way. Beauty often is something that exists purely for those who can afford to admire it. You imagine standing out there, boots buried in the snow, breathing in the stillness. But you won't see daylight again until evening. Back downstairs, breakfast is chaos. The family eats in comfort, while the servants scramble in the kitchen below, refilling plates, fetching tea, scrubbing pots. The sound of clinking silverware filters through the floorboards, each ring of a fork, another reminder of the world above. When the meal ends, you carry the leftover trays to the servants' table. The cook nods. You lot can have what's left. The portions are small, but no one complains. You eat quickly, hands cupped around a tin mug of tea gone lukewarm. The steam fogs your vision, and you close your eyes for a moment, pretending it's warmth. The bread is stale, the eggs cold, but you swallow each bite gratefully. Hunger teaches gratitude, even when it shouldn't. After breakfast, you're sent to the upper floors again, dusting, sweeping, fetching, fixing. The rhythm is endless. You move like water, silent and unnoticed. You dust around, portraits of people who never lifted a broom sweep under carpets thick enough to smother sound, straighten books that no one reads. Each task erases a trace of your existence. That's the goal. By noon, your hands have gone numb again. You flex your fingers, trying to coax blood back into them. The mistress passes you in the corridor, her face framed by curls, her fur collar brushing your shoulder. "Oh, you poor thing," she says lightly. "It's simply freezing today, isn't it?" You smile and nod. "Yes, ma'am." She disappears into her room, where a roaring fire and thick blankets await. You stare at the closed door, wondering if she noticed the soot on your apron. Probably not. Historians often describe the Victorian home as a miracle of order and elegance. They never mention the hands that made it so, the unseen choreography of survival beneath the surface, the quiet shivering between each task. You think about that sometimes, how invisible labor keeps the world spinning while the world looks away. By the time evening comes, your arms ache, your back feels carved from stone, and your eyes sting from the smoke. You return to the servants' hall, where a weak fire struggles in the grate. The others are gathered, close their faces pale in the glow. Someone tells a joke. Someone else groans. The laughter that follows is small but real, the kind of laughter born not from joy, but from endurance. You sit beside the hearth, holding your hands out to the flames. The warmth bites and soothes all at once. You close your eyes, let your head fall back, and breathe. It's not enough, not nearly, but it's something. And in this house, in this winter, something is everything. There's a certain quiet that comes before dawn, in winter. The kind that makes you feel as though the whole world has stopped breathing. The house is still. No footsteps, no clatter, no laughter from upstairs. Just the low groan of old wood settling under frost. You lie awake, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the sound of your own heartbeat under the blankets. It's too early, even for the first bell, but sleep won't come back. It never does after nights like this. Your body hurts in a dozen small, familiar ways. Shoulders tight from hauling coal. Wrists sore from scrubbing. Knees stiff from hours spent kneeling on cold floors. You used to think you'd get used to it, but pain doesn't really become softer. It just becomes quieter. Like background noise, you stop noticing it until it flares again. You roll over, pull your shawl tighter, and count the seconds between breaths. The frost on the window has thickened overnight, turning the glass into a sheet of white lace. Somewhere above a door creaks. You freeze instinctively, half expecting a voice to call, but it's only the wind pressing against the walls. You exhale slowly and close your eyes, pretending just for a heartbeat that you're somewhere else, somewhere warm. A small cottage, maybe. A hearth that's yours. The sound of a kettle, not a bell. Then the real bell rings. It cuts through your dream like a blade. You swing your legs out of bed and wince as your bare feet meet the icy floor. The air feels heavier this morning, dense, sharp, unforgiving. When you stand, the boards creak under your weight, loud enough to wake the scullery maid in the next room. She groans softly and pulls her blanket over her head. "Just 5 more minutes," she mumbles. You smile faintly, though there's no humor in it. "We don't get 5 minutes," you whisper back. And you're right. The corridor outside your quarters smells faintly of soot and damp straw. A candle, guttering in its holder, throws long, nervous shadows on the wall. You grab your apron, tie it quickly, and make your way down the narrow stairs. Each step is a small test of balance, slick with condensation. The air grows colder as you descend, cold enough that your breath hangs around you like smoke. The kitchen is dark when you enter. The fire has died again. You kneel before the grate, sweeping away last night's ashes, stacking new kindling, coaxing the reluctant flame back to life. You don't even think about it anymore. Your hands know what to do before your mind catches up. When the first spark catches, you blow gently, and the ember blooms into gold. It's the smallest victory, but it's the first warmth of the day. You stay close to it for a moment, hands outstretched, soaking in the heat while you can. You know it won't last. It never does. By the time the cook arrives, your breath no longer fogs in the air. She nods in approval as she removes her gloves. "Good girl. Now let's have that kettle boiling." Her voice is rough, but kind in its way. You pour water into the pot, listening to it hiss as it meets the iron. The sound is comforting, a promise of warmth, however brief. Outside the courtyard is a sea of white. The snow hasn't stopped for days. Through the small window, you can see the sky bruised with morning light. It's beautiful if you forget how cruel it is. You know what the day will bring: frozen pumps, heavy buckets, aching fingers, and frost that bites through every layer of wool. The first bell rings again upstairs this time. You grab the coal scuttle and head for the stairs. The weight of it digs into your shoulder, but you've carried worse. The steps creak, the air grows warmer, and you can already smell perfume from the master's study. You knock once softly. Enter. He's by the fire, of course, already dressed. His waistcoat gleams with gold buttons. "A little more coal," he says without looking up from his newspaper. "The draft in this room is dreadful." You add the coal, quietly, careful not to let any dust fall onto the rug. The flames jump, feeding greedily on the fuel. The warmth rolls over you, so rich and full it almost hurts. You feel your cheeks flush, your hands thaw. You want to linger just for a second more, but you can't. "Thank you," he says, absently, eyes still on the paper. You curtsy and step away. The moment you leave the room, the chill returns, settling into your bones like a shadow. Back downstairs, the cook is already yelling for more water. The pipes have frozen again, and the scullery maid is trying to thaw them with boiling kettles. The floor is slick, the air heavy with steam. You grab a mop before someone slips. It's chaos, but it's a familiar kind of chaos. By noon, the kitchen is alive, with noise pots, clanging spoons, scraping voices overlapping. The smell of soup fills the air thick and comforting. You catch a taste when the cook isn't looking, dipping a spoon into the pot for a quick sip. It burns your tongue, but you don't care. Warmth is warmth, however it comes. Then the butler enters, tall and severe. "Mind the noise," he says. "The mistress is hosting guests for tea. Everything must be perfect. Everything must always be perfect." You polish the silver tray until your reflection stares back, faint, distorted, half erased. The tea is poured, the cakes are arranged. You follow the butler upstairs, carrying the tray with both hands. The drawing room is bright and warm, sunlight pouring through lace curtains. The guests sit in a circle of velvet chairs, their laughter soft and effortless. The fire crackles merrily in the corner. As you serve, one of the women smiles at you. "It must be lovely working in such a beautiful house," she says. You nod. "Yes, ma'am." Lovely isn't the word you'd use, but you've learned not to correct the wealthy when they mistake your survival for privilege. The bell rings again later, for dishes, for coal, for errands. The day blurs together, one task bleeding into the next. You lose count of the times you've gone up and down the stairs. Your legs ache, your fingers sting, and by the time supper ends, you're running on habit alone. When the last fire is banked and the last tray washed, you sit beside the kitchen hearth, staring at the dying glow. The other servants have gone to bed. The house is quiet again, except for the ticking of the clock and the whisper of wind outside. Historians like to talk about the romance of Victorian winters, the soft glow of gaslight, the snow on rooftops, the carols by candlelight. None of them mention the servants who kept those lights burning, who shoveled the snow, who froze behind the curtains while the songs were sung. You poke the fire gently, watching the last embers collapse into ash. A single spark leaps up, bright and defiant. You smile at it, small and tired. Still hear you whisper, "Just like me." Then you stand, stretch your aching back, and turn toward the stairs. The house hums faintly around you, half asleep, half listening. You blow out the lamp and step into the dark. The cold greets you instantly, wrapping itself around your shoulders like an old familiar friend. You pull your shawl tighter and keep walking, because tomorrow will be the same, and somehow you'll still be here. It's Christmas morning, but you wouldn't know it down here. No carols, no laughter, no shimmering tree strung with ribbons and gold. Just the steady hiss of boiling water, the scrape of brushes on pans, and the smell of smoke curling through the damp corridors. The house above will soon wake to the scent of roasted goose, plum pudding, and pine traditions that spell joy for them and work for you. You pull your shawl tighter and glance toward the small window near the ceiling. Snow drifts lazily outside, catching the faint gray light of dawn. It's beautiful, yes, but cruel too. Beauty always seems to belong to someone else. You dip your hands into the basin, the water shockingly cold, despite the steam rising from it. The soap bites your skin as you scrub. The cook stands by the range, her cheeks flushed from the heat. "Keep those dishes moving, we've guests today," she says, voice rough from shouting. "And don't forget the pudding cloth, it needs airing, or it'll smell of damp again." "Yes, ma'am." Your voice comes out faint, hoarse, from the cold air and smoke. You rub your knuckles, already red and sore, and move to fetch the cloth. The scullery maid, little Annie, coughs beside you, her breath coming out in pale puffs. "Merry Christmas," she says, smiling weakly. You can't help but return the smile. "Merry Christmas, Annie." The words feel strange on your tongue, almost make-believe. The hall above creaks. The family is stirring. You hear the faint rustle of silk, the whisper of slippers across the floor, and then the first bell. It rings long and clear-cutting through the house like a hymn. You glance at the clock, barely 6. The butler enters, already dressed, already composed, as if sleep were optional for him. "The fires upstairs need checking before the guests arrive," he says. "And make sure the children's presents are arranged beneath the tree. Quickly now." "Yes, sir." You grab your coal scuttle and hurry up the back stairs, breath puffing white in the air. The steps groan beneath your boots, their wood, slick with condensation. By the time you reach the main floor, the sound of music is floating faintly through the hall. Someone's winding the phonograph, one of those new Christmas records, the master imported from London. The drawing room is aglow. The fire crackles, candles flicker, and the tree stands tall in the corner, shimmering with glass ornaments and ribbons. It's beautiful in the way a dream is beautiful. Too perfect, too distant. You kneel beside the hearth, feed the flames more coal, and let yourself steal a brief second to feel the warmth. The mistress enters, wrapped in velvet, her hair glinting gold in the firelight. She carries a small silver bell in her hand. "Ah, there you are," she says. "Make sure the nursery fire is ready before the children come down. I don't want them catching cold on Christmas." "Of course, ma'am." She smiles not unkindly, and for a moment, you see something almost human in her expression. Then she turns away, and you're invisible again. Upstairs in the nursery, the fire has burned low. The wallpaper, painted with faded rabbits and flowers, seems to shiver in the dim light. You rebuild the fire, coaxing the embers back to life. The air fills slowly with warmth, with the faint crackle of burning wood. You arrange the children's gifts beneath the small tree dolls, toy soldiers' books bound in red and gold. You pause at one, a stuffed bear with button eyes, and run your thumb along its soft fur. It's warm from the firelight, and you smile, despite yourself. Then you hear footsteps. You straighten quickly as the governess enters, followed by the two children, their faces bright with excitement. They rush to the tree, squealing with delight. "It's snowing," the little girl cries. "Look, it's snowing." You step back watching as they unwrap ribbons and tear paper, their laughter filling the room like sunlight. For a moment it almost feels contagious. Then the governess catches your eye and clears her throat gently. You bow and slip from the room, closing the door behind you. In the hallway, you pause. The sounds of joy spill faintly through the door, muffled laughter, the crinkle of wrapping paper, the hiss of the fire. You press your hand against the wood, feeling the heat through the panel. Then you turn away and walk back toward the servants' stairs. Down in the kitchen, the mood is lighter than usual. The cook hums an old carol as she bastes the goose, her voice cracked but steady. Even the butler seems less severe, though he'd never admit it. Someone snuck a bottle of sherry into the corner, and when he's not looking, the kitchen maid pours a few drops into each of your teacups. "A Christmas toast," she whispers. "To us poor frozen souls." You raise your cup, smile, and drink. The sherry burns down your throat, sharp and sweet. It's the first real warmth you've felt all morning. "Think they'll ever let us have a fire down here?" someone asks. The cook snorts. "Only if hell freezes over," which by the feel of it might be any day now. Laughter ripples through the room. It's brief, fragile, but real. The rest of the day passes in a blur of heat and motion. You carry trays, polished silver refill glasses. The family laughs and drinks upstairs, their voices ringing through the hall like bells. At one point you pause near the doorway and watch them, the shimmer of gowns, the glow of candlelight, the glitter of gold jewelry. They toast to health, to fortune, to love. You stand in the shadow unseen, holding an empty platter, wondering what you'd toast to if you were allowed. When the meal ends, you gather plates slick with gravy, glasses still warm from lips that never spoke your name. Your back aches, your legs tremble, but you keep moving. You always keep moving. Later, when the house begins to quiet again, you sneak into the servants' hall. Someone has saved you a slice of pudding, small, uneven, but beautiful. You sit by the dim fire, fork in hand, and take a bite. It's rich with spice and warmth. For once, you let yourself close your eyes and just taste. Historians will write about Victorian Christmas as an age of generosity, about charity, family, and moral grace. But those books won't mention you. They won't mention the frost on your blanket or the burns on your hands. They won't say that generosity had an upstairs and a downstairs, and that warmth was rationed like sugar. You finish your pudding, wipe your hands, and lean back against the wall. The fire is nearly out, but one small ember glows stubbornly at its center. You watch it flicker, breathing in the faint scent of cinnamon and smoke. For the first time, all day you smile. Not out of joy, out of defiance. Merry Christmas, you whisper to no one in particular. Still here. The ember flares once, as if answering you, and then fades gently into the dark. After Christmas, the house changes. The laughter fades, the decorations come down, and the cold moves back in, as if it had simply been waiting in the wings for its cue. The halls that were once filled with music now echo only with footsteps and sighs. The pine needles from the tree scatter across the floors, sharp underfoot, and the scent of spice and roast meat is replaced by the dull smell of wet wool and smoke. For the servants, the days after Christmas are worse than the days before. The festivities mean extra work, washing dishes, polishing silver, scrubbing wax from the floors, laundering linens stained with gravy and wine. And yet, when it's over, there's no relief. Only more silence, more frost. You stand at the scullery sink, hands plunged into cold gray water. The soap stings your cracked knuckles. Beside you, the scullery maid hums faintly, her voice so soft it's almost lost in the clatter of metal. The tune is sad, something from the country, something that doesn't belong in these walls. You recognize it, though you can't remember from where. It's a melody about warmth, a lie dressed as memory. The cook moves behind you, muttering to herself. Waste of good brandy, that pudding, she grumbles. Half of it gone to the dogs, I'd wager. You don't reply. Your arms ache too much to waste words. The scullery maid sneezes suddenly, a small wet sound that echoes through the room. The cook frowns. You'd best not be catching something, she says. We can't afford anyone ill. I'm fine, the girl says quickly, though she isn't. You can see it in her face, the pale lips, the glassy eyes, the way her hands tremble as she reaches for the rag. She can't be more than 14. By noon, the pipes have frozen again. The kitchen fills with the dull ringing of metal as the footmen try to hammer the ice loose. You grab a kettle of boiling water and pour it down the sink, watching the steam rise and vanish into the rafters. Careful, the butler calls sharply. Don't crack the pipe. You set the kettle down and step back, wiping your forehead with your sleeve. The heat lasts barely a heartbeat. The frost wins again, creeping up the walls like a living thing. When the crisis passes, the house falls into its familiar rhythm. Work silence breath. The masters are in London for the week, leaving only a skeleton crew to maintain the estate. Fewer people means fewer fires, which means the cold has free rein. The rooms above are dark, and still the air inside them colder than the garden outside. You've been told to air them out to keep the damp from ruining the wallpaper. So you open each window in turn, one after another, letting the wind roll through like an unwelcome guest. Your fingers go numb almost instantly. Curtains billow, furniture creaks, and you can feel your breath freezing as you move. In one of the unused bedrooms, a mirror stands propped against the wall. You catch your reflection as you pass a pale ghost in a gray dress, face hollowed by light and shadow. For a second, you don't recognize yourself. Then you do, and it feels worse. You close the window, shut out the wind, and stand there a moment longer. The silence is strange, thick, expectant. You think you can hear the faint crackle of the fire from the servants' hall far below. You'd give anything to be there now, to feel even a whisper of heat. Instead, you move to the next room. By the time you return downstairs, the cook is wrapping a scarf around her neck. Market run, she says. Need someone to carry the sack. You volunteer not because you want to, but because the thought of fresh air feels like freedom, even if it's cold enough to bite. Outside, the world is white and endless. Snow blankets everything. Roof road trees. The sky hangs low, thick with gray clouds. Your boots sink into the drifts as you follow the cook down the path toward the village. The cold is sharp, pure, almost clean compared to the damp chill inside. It burns your lungs in a way that feels alive. The village market is nearly empty. A few traders huddle beneath canvas, stalls their breath, visible as they shout prices into the wind. The smell of fish, hay, and smoke mixes in the air. You follow the cook from stand to stand, gathering vegetables, salt flour. When she isn't looking, you let your eyes wander to the baker's window, glowing with warmth, to the children, chasing each other through the snow, their laughter like bells. You smile, without meaning to. Keep up, the cook calls. You hurry after her, clutching the sack of flour. The wind picks up, blowing snow into your face. Your fingers are numb, but your heart feels lighter than it has in days. For a brief moment outside of the manor's walls, you almost feel human again. Back at the house, reality returns quickly. The warmth vanishes as soon as you step through the servant's door. The cook heads for the kitchen. You go to unload the coal delivery that's arrived in your absence. The man who brings it, a broad-shouldered miner with blackened hands, gives you a sympathetic look. "Hard work, miss," he says softly, stacking the coal. You nod, offering a small smile. "Harder when it's cold." He laughs, a low, rough sound. "Then it's hard, every day, I reckon." He tips his hat and leaves. The door shuts, and you're alone again with the chill and the echo of his words. Later that evening, as the servants gather around the weak fire for supper, the scullery maid coughs again. This time, it doesn't stop. The sound rattles in her chest, deep and wet. The cook frowns. "You'll be no good to anyone if you fall sick," she says. "Go lie down before you drop." The girl nods, too tired to argue. She shuffles away, clutching her thin shawl. You watch her go, worry twisting in your stomach. There's no doctor for people like you. Only rest, and rest is something none of you can afford. After supper, you take what little tea is left in the pot and sneak it to the girl's room. She's lying on her side, coughing into her pillow. Her eyes flutter open when you enter. "You'll get in trouble," she whispers. "Not if you don't tell." You hand her the mug. She drinks slowly, her fingers trembling. When she's done, you set the cup down and tuck the blanket around her shoulders. It's thin, barely enough to trap warmth, but it's something. "Thank you," she murmurs, already drifting toward sleep. You sit beside her for a moment, watching her breathing slow. The air in the small room is bitter cold. You rub your hands together, then press them gently over her blanket, hoping to share whatever heat you have left. Historians like to write about the great inventions of the Victorian age, how gaslight brightened homes and industry conquered nature. But they never mention what it costs to keep those lights burning. They never mention the fingers that froze so others could be warm. When you finally stand to leave, your knees crack like wood. You blow out the candle, step into the hallway, and let the darkness close around you. The floor is cold, the silence colder. You return to your room, sit on the edge of your bed, and stare at the faint frost on the window. Somewhere far above the house creaks as if sighing. You whisper softly into the dark, "Still here." And the house in its own way seems to whisper back. The winter deepens. January arrives, with no mercy, turning the world outside into a frozen painting. The manor seems smaller now, swallowed by snowdrifts that rise halfway up the garden walls. The windows are rimmed with ice on both sides. Even the fires, no matter how fiercely they burn, can't chase away the chill that creeps in through the cracks. The servants begin to joke that the cold has personality, that it sneaks, listens, chooses its victims. You laugh with them sometimes, but part of you wonders if it's true. Every day feels colder than the one before. Every step through the corridor sends a draft crawling up your spine. You wake before dawn, as always, to the same bell, the same frost biting through your blanket. The air is still, too still. You strike a match and watch it die before it catches. The wick of your candle has frozen solid. You rub it between your fingers until it bends, then try again. This time the flame lives, trembling weakly against the dark. The scullery maid's bed is empty. You feel a flicker of worry. She's been coughing worse each night. When you ask the others, the cook tells you the girl's been sent home to recover. Her tone is brisk, but you can see the shadow behind her eyes. Everyone knows what sent home means in winter. You nod, say nothing, and go to work. The fire in the kitchen has burned low. You kneel to clean the grate, scraping away the ash. The air smells of smoke and soap, bitter and familiar. You've spent so much time here it started to feel like a second skin, hard, cold, and necessary. The cook shuffles in, muttering about supplies. "Flour's low. Coal's lower. Tell the butler, before we freeze to death, if he ever listens." I'll see to it, you say. He won't listen. He never does. You feed the fire stack kindling and breathe in the heat as the range comes back to life. It's a strange kind of blessing, the way warmth can hurt. Your skin prickles, your hands sting, but you don't pull away. Pain means life. You've learned to take it where you can. Upstairs, the household is quieter now. The master and mistress have gone to the city for a few weeks, leaving only the steward and his wife to oversee things. It should make the days easier, but it doesn't. The house feels heavier when it's half empty, like it's mourning its own silence. You make your rounds anyway. Dusting rooms, no one will use lighting fires. No one will sit beside. The great hall is the worst. Its fireplace is vast, a cathedral of stone that eats coal faster than you can shovel it in. The flames rise tall and bright, but the heat never seems to reach you. You stand too close, too long, until your cheeks burn and your boots grow slick with melted snow. When you finally step back, dizziness hits you. You grip the mantle to steady yourself, watching the flames blur and twist. For a moment you imagine stepping into them, not out of despair, but curiosity. Would it hurt less than the cold? Would it feel like freedom, even for a second? You shake your head, quickly ashamed of the thought, and force yourself to move on. In the hallway, your reflection catches in a mirror. You almost don't recognize yourself. Your skin is pale and cracked, your hair dull, your eyes hollow but alert. You look like the house exhausted, built for endurance. The days blend together. You lose track of time, measuring hours only by the rise and fall of the fires. The sound of shovels outside tells you when snow is cleared. The creak of doors tells you when the wind changes. Sometimes you think you hear the scullery maid's cough echoing faintly from the empty rooms. You tell yourself it's just the house. Houses keep memories. By mid-January, frost flowers bloom along the inside of your window. They're delicate, intricate, cruelly beautiful. You trace one with your fingertip and feel it melt beneath your touch. It's strange how even ice can seem alive. One night, you're called to the steward's quarters. His wife has taken ill fever, coughing something that sounds too familiar. You and the cook take turns, bringing hot water and broth, but nothing helps. The air in the room feels heavy with damp heat. Every breath smells faintly of sickness and smoke. Best keep your distance, the butler warns. We can't have half the staff laid up. You nod, but you stay anyway. The woman's hand is burning in yours, her pulse fluttering like a trapped bird. She whispers something, words lost in the crackle of the fire. When her hand finally goes still, you close her eyes and sit there for a moment, listening to the sound of snow hitting the window. The next morning, the house is quieter than usual. No one mentions her name. The work goes on, as it always does. Fires still need tending, floors still need scrubbing, breakfast still needs serving. You move through the motions like a ghost, your body doing what your mind no longer wants to. That night, you sit by the kitchen fire long after the others have gone to bed. The flames are low, the shadows long. You can feel the cold, waiting just beyond the walls, pressing against the windows, whispering at the door. For a moment, you imagine opening it, stepping outside barefoot, letting the snow take you. You wonder if it would be quiet. You wonder if it would be peace. Instead, you stand, grab the poker, and feed the fire. The coals flare red, pulsing like a heartbeat. You hold your hands out to the heat and breathe. Historians often write that Victorian servants were resilient, bound by duty and devotion. Maybe they're right, but they never say what resilience costs. They never mention the nights spent staring into a dying fire, fighting not the cold of the world, but the cold creeping into your own chest. You sit there until your eyes sting from the smoke. The fire hisses softly, as if answering your thoughts. You whisper to it, barely audible. We keep each other alive, don't we? The flame flickers once, and you choose to believe it's a yes. When you finally go to bed, the frost has already claimed your blanket. You curl into it anyway, pull your knees close, and close your eyes. The wind moans through the corridor, low and mournful, like a lullaby only the tired can hear. You dream not of warmth, not even of escape, but of a single ember that never dies, a small stubborn light in an endless winter. When the bell rings again at dawn, you open your eyes, whisper, "Still here," and rise to feed another fire. February arrives like a bruise, dark, swollen, and slow to heal. The snow outside has turned gray, with soot pressed down into thick, icy slabs that glimmer under the weak daylight. The trees are bare skeletons, the garden statues half buried, and the air inside the manor feels as if it's been frozen mid-breath. The cold doesn't bite anymore. It just lingers, patient and heavy, like an illness that refuses to end. You've stopped expecting the thaw. The others have too. Every day blends into the same rhythm: wake, work, breathe, endure. Fires are lit, floors are scrubbed, meals are served. No one speaks of spring anymore. The house itself seems to have forgotten the idea of warmth. This morning your body moves before your mind. You rise when the bell rings, dress in the same stiff uniform, and descend into the same dim corridor. Your hands find the coal scuttle automatically. Your feet know every creaking stair. It's like walking through a memory that never ends. When you reach the kitchen, the cook is already there, standing close to the range. Her eyes are sunken, her breath a thin cloud in the air. "Coal's low again," she mutters. "And there's talk. We'll have to ration it. Lord help us if this winter drags on." You glance at the fire. It's small, trembling, barely alive. The thought of rationing heat feels almost cruel. You nod silently, then kneel to feed it what little fuel remains. The flames leap, hungry and desperate, and you feel their warmth wash over your face. It's a fleeting comfort, gone as soon as you stand. The butler appears in the doorway, buttoned up as neatly as ever, though even he looks worn. "The mistress returns from London this evening," he says. "The drawing room must be aired, and the fires there prepared." "Yes, sir," you say. "See that the rooms upstairs are spotless. She'll bring guests." The cook snorts quietly when he leaves. "Guests," she mutters, as if the house isn't haunted enough. You smile at that, though your lips barely move. The manor does feel haunted lately, not by ghosts, but by the weight of all who've lived and worked and frozen here. Every draft feels like someone's memory brushing past your neck. You carry the coal upstairs, the scuttle digging into your hip. The hallways are dim, the lamps low to save oil. Dust hangs in the air like fog. You can hear faint dripping somewhere. A leak in the roof, perhaps, where ice has begun to melt in slow, painful drops. The sound echoes through the silence. In the drawing room, the air smells stale. The curtains are heavy with dust, the furniture covered in thin sheets. You open the windows briefly, just as instructed, and the cold rushes in like a wave. It's sharp, clean, merciless. You inhale deeply and almost cough from the shock of it. Then, you close the windows and set to work. Flint, kindling, coal. The same ritual over and over. You've lit so many fires this winter that you could do it blindfolded. You strike the flint cokes, the spark breathes life into the ashes. The fire catches flares and grows. It's beautiful for a moment, alive in a way you aren't allowed to be. When you're done, you step back and watch the flames curl upward, licking the stone. The light paints the walls, gold casting shadows that almost look like movement. For a second, you could almost believe the room is alive again. That warmth is something that might return and stay. Then the butler's voice breaks the spell. "You've missed a spot on the mantel," he says. You bow your head. "Yes, sir." By the time the mistress arrives that evening, the house looks perfect. Fires blaze in every hearth, lamps glow softly behind lace curtains, and the air smells faintly of lavender and polish. You stand by the stairwell as she enters, her coat trimmed with fur, her cheeks flushed from the cold. Behind her, two guests laugh softly, shaking snow from their boots. She smiles at the butler, at the guests, at everything except the servants. "How lovely to be home," she says. "London is dreadful this time of year, so wet and crowded. At least here we have peace." You think of the endless fires you've tended, the cold you've carried in your bones, and wonder if peace is the right word. The rest of the evening passes in quiet obedience. You pour tea, fetch shawls, polish silver. The guests talk about the weather, how picturesque the snow looks on the fields, How cozy the house feels with its fires burning. Cozy. You want to laugh. You wonder what they'd say if they saw the servants' quarters, the frost that blooms on your windows each night like white flowers. When the guests retire, you begin the last round of your work, checking every hearth, banking every flame. The house grows quieter with each room. You move from one end to the other, carrying a candle that flickers weakly in the drafts. The silence is immense, almost holy. In the great hall, the fire has burned low. You kneel to tend it, scraping the coals into a neat pile. The light flickers over the portraits on the walls, the generations of masters and mistresses who've stared down from their frames for a century or more. You wonder if they ever thought about the people below the stairs, the ones who kept their fires alive. When the last coal is settled, you sit for a moment on the cold stone floor. Your reflection shimmers faintly in the brass grate. You look older tonight, though. You can't say why. Maybe it's the shadows under your eyes, or the fine dust of ash that never seems to wash away. Footsteps echo softly behind you. It's Thomas the footman. He sits down beside you, without a word, pulling his coat tighter. For a while, neither of you speaks. The only sound is the crackle of the fire. "Do you ever think about leaving?" he asks finally, his voice low. You blink. Leaving this house, this life, the cold, all of it. You stare into the fire. The flames twist and dance, bright and alive. And you imagine walking straight into them, letting them burn away the numbness, turning all the cold inside you to light. Sometimes you whisper, "But where would we go?" He chuckles softly. "Anywhere warmer." You smile at that, but it doesn't last. The thought of warmth feels too much like hope, and hope is dangerous here. It can make you careless. He stands brushing soot from his trousers. "Get some rest," he says. "Tomorrow's another long one." You nod, but you stay seated after he leaves. The fire crackles softly, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat. You reach out, holding your hands close to the heat, feeling the sting of life return to your fingers. Historians might one day call this era progress, an age of invention, of light, of refinement. But progress always demands a sacrifice. You look at your hands red and raw, and realize that you and people like you are that sacrifice. When the fire begins to fade, you rise, bank the coals, and whisper to the embers, "Still here." Outside, the snow falls again, silent and endless, covering every footprint, every trace. The thaw begins so quietly that no one notices it at first. One morning, the windows drip instead of glitter. The icicles hanging from the eaves shrink into sharp little points, and the steady groan of the frozen earth gives way to the sound of water trickling through the gutters. The air still bites, but there's something gentler underneath a dampness that smells faintly of soil and smoke and the promise of spring. You don't trust it. No one does. The cold has tricked you before retreating just long enough to remind you what comfort feels like before it rushes back with teeth. Still, when you open the kitchen door and the wind that hits your face isn't a knife, but a sigh, you stop for a moment and breathe it in. It feels almost human. The cook, always suspicious of optimism, frowns at the sound of dripping outside. "That'll flood the cellar," she mutters. "Every year the same. Melt one problem, make another." You smile faintly, though she's right. Water already snakes along the cracks in the flagstone floor, and the smell of damp coal seeps from the storage room. You fetch a mop, wringing it out, with hands that finally ache from wetness rather than frostbite. For the first time in months, the sting feels welcome. Upstairs, the family is in good spirits. The mistress walks through the hall with a light shawl instead of fur. At last, she says, her voice bright with relief. "I was beginning to think winter would never end." You follow her at a distance, carrying kindling to the parlor. The room smells of roses again, faint, but returning. The light through the windows looks softer, less like ice, more like silk. You kneel by the hearth, though the fire barely needs tending now. When you strike the flint, the spark feels easy, no longer a desperate act of survival, just another task. The mistress glances over her shoulder and smiles. "You must be glad for the change in weather," she says. "Yes, ma'am," you answer, though the truth feels complicated. Warmth is a stranger you've forgotten how to trust. She laughs lightly. Oh, I suppose for people like you, winter must be dreadful. You bow your head to hide the flicker of something anger, maybe, or exhaustion that flashes through you. People like you. As if the cold chooses favorites. You add another log to the fire. Watch it catch and stand. Outside, the snow shrinks into puddles. Birds return hesitantly, their songs uncertain. The stable boys whistle, while they work stamping their feet on wet ground instead of ice. The air smells of thawing earth, muddy, rich, alive. You watch from the servant's entrance for a moment, hands folded, feeling a small, strange ache in your chest. You used to love this time of year when you were a child. Spring meant color, sound, motion. It meant markets reopening and streets full of laughter. Now it mostly means more work. The melting snow reveals all the dirt and damage winter left behind, gutters to be cleared, leaks to be patched, walls to be scrubbed of mold. Still, it's better than silence. You spend the afternoon on your knees scrubbing the stone tiles in the corridor. The water in the bucket stays liquid, not ice. The smell of soap fills the air, sharp but clean. The rhythm of brush against floor feels almost meditative. You don't even realize you're humming until the butler passes by and raises an eyebrow. Someone's cheerful, he says dryly. Just grateful the water's not frozen, sir. He grunts in acknowledgement, the closest thing to humor he ever offers, and keeps walking. As the day passes, the sunlight shifts, finding its way through cracks and windows, long sealed by frost. Dust motes dance in the beams, gold and fleeting. The servants' hall glows for the first time in months. You all notice it, the way the walls seem to breathe again, the way sound travels differently when the air isn't heavy with cold. Even the cook hums as she kneads, though her voice, a rough but steady rhythm. By evening, the house feels changed, not warmer exactly, but lighter. The air doesn't cling anymore, it moves. You sit at the servants' table eating your small supper of bread and soup and listen to the faint drip of water in the walls. It's the sound of winter dying, slow and wet. You'd think it would bring joy, but instead you feel something closer to grief. The cold has been your companion for so long. Its departure feels almost like losing someone who, for all their cruelty, never left you. Later that night, you go to check the last of the fires. The great hall is quiet, the flames low but steady. You kneel, stir the embers, and watch them glow. The light paints your hands in gold and shadow. You notice for the first time in months that your knuckles aren't cracked. The skin, though rough, has started to heal. Thomas enters, carrying a bucket of water. He looks at the fire, then at you. Smells different, doesn't it? You tilt your head. What does the air? Not like smoke anymore. Like rain. You nod slowly. I think it's the thaw. He smiles, though it's tired. Never thought I'd say this, but I might miss the quiet. Once spring comes, there'll be people everywhere again. Guests, gardens, chores that never end. Maybe you say softly, but at least the fires won't be begging for life. He laughs at that, and for once it doesn't sound hollow. You both stand in silence for a while, watching the last of the embers fade to orange. The fire pops gently, shedding a tiny shower of sparks. One lands on your sleeve and dies, instantly leaving no mark. You reach out and brush away the ash. Historians might write about the beauty of spring, the return of color, the rebirth of nature, but they'll never write about the way it feels to earn warmth, to crawl out of the cold by inches. They won't talk about the quiet pride of surviving something that wanted to kill you slowly. When the last log crumbles, you stand stretching your sore back. The hall is still, but not oppressive anymore. Somewhere upstairs, water drips rhythmically into a bowl. The sound is steady, soft, like a clock resetting. You bank the coals one last time and whisper, "Rest now. You've done enough." It takes you a moment to realize you're not talking to the fire. As you walk back through the corridor, the air feels different, damp, yes, but alive. You touch the wall absently, feel the faint tremor of running water inside. The house is waking up again. In your room, the frost has melted from the window pane. The glass is clear for the first time in months. You press your palm against it and feel not cold but cool. Beyond it, the moon glows pale over the wet earth. The snow is almost gone, You breathe out long and slow and watch the glass stay clear. For the first time all winter, your breath doesn't linger, and you whisper to yourself, not as a prayer, not as a promise, but as a fact. Still here. By March, the thaw has fully arrived. The world outside the manor glistens in muted browns and grays, mud slush, and puddles that mirror a pale, trembling sky. The snow is gone, but its memory lingers. The ground smells of rot and wet leaves, the way it always does when something old gives way to something new. Inside, the air feels lighter, easier to breathe. The worst is over, they all say. And yet for you, the cold has sunk too deep to ever really leave. You rise before dawn, as you always do. The bell rings softer now, more habit than command. There's no frost on the floorboards this morning, but the chill is still there, quiet and patient. You dress quickly, wrap your shawl tight, and descend the narrow staircase. The walls no longer sweat with condensation, but they're damp, smelling faintly of mildew. The candle flame barely flickers. There's no wind left to fight it. When you reach the kitchen, the cook is already awake, rubbing her knees as she leans over the range. The air is warmer here now, warmer than it's been in months. The fire burns low, but steady. No longer a battle, but a companion. The kettle hums, instead of hissing. You pour water into mugs, the steam curling lazily, instead of vanishing. Spring's coming, the cook says, half smiling. You nod. I can smell it, and you can. The scent of thawing soil drifts through the cracks, damp, dark, and almost sweet. It's the smell of beginnings, but you know better than to trust beginnings. They always come with debts. The day passes in quiet rhythm. The fires need less tending, now though the habit remains. You polish, sweep, carry clean, each movement smooth, practiced and visible. Upstairs, the mistress hums as she oversees the replacement of the winter drapes. They've gathered so much dust, she says, pinching the fabric between gloved fingers. I don't know how we've lived with them. You smile politely, bow your head, and remove the curtains she's never touched. By afternoon, the house fills with light. Real sunlight, golden and soft, spilling through the newly bare windows. The mirrors sparkle. The air smells faintly of lavender and polish. The mistress beams. Isn't it lovely? So bright, so alive again. You nod. It is lovely in a way that hurts. The sunlight feels strange on your face, too pure, after months of gray. You can feel the heat of it faint and new creeping through your uniform. For a moment, it almost feels like forgiveness. When you return downstairs, the other servants are gathered in the hall, talking quietly. Thomas is laughing with one of the maids, his voice softer than you've ever heard it. Even the butler seems more human, less carved from stone. The cook ladles out stew thinner than usual, but steaming hot. Eat while it's good, she says. We'll need strength for the cleaning. You eat slowly, savoring the taste. The stew is salty, warm, alive with herbs. You can't remember the last time food had flavor. Feels strange, doesn't it? Thomas says, glancing toward the window. The quiet, I mean. No howling wind. No fires to fight. Almost peaceful. Almost you agree. The word hangs between you like a sigh. The thaw has changed the house in more ways than one. The pipes groan as water rushes through them again, alive for the first time in weeks. The floors creak in unfamiliar ways, the boards expanding in the damp. Even the walls seem to breathe. But with the warmth comes work, muddy footprints, to scrub curtains, to wash rooms to air. You start with the grand staircase. The sun pours down through the high windows, painting the wood in long bands of gold. You've never noticed the color of the steps before. They're not just brown, but rich, amber, the warm like honey. The banister gleams as you polish it, and for a moment you can see your reflection clearly, not warped by shadow or soot. You look older, thinner, but alive. You pause, your hand resting on the railing. For the first time you realize you've survived something the house itself might not forget. As evening approaches, the light fades into a deep, soft gray. The house glows with a new kind of quiet, not heavy, not cold, but tired. You check the fires one last time. Most of them are allowed to die now, their purpose fading with the frost. Only the kitchen and drawing room remain lit. You bank the coals, gently whispering the same words you always do. Rest now. When you return to the servants' hall, the others are sitting close together, cups of tea in hand. Someone has brought a small loaf of bread, still warm from the oven. You tear off a piece, the crust crackling under your fingers. The warmth seeps into your palms. For a long time, no one speaks. The silence isn't the old kind, the fearful, frozen kind. It's something softer, something that feels like peace. Finally, Thomas breaks it. "You think we'll remember this winter?" he asks. The cook snorts. "My bones will." Everyone laughs quietly, even you. You sip your tea and think about his question. Will you remember it? The endless cold, the frost creeping across the floor, the ache that settled in your hands and never left. The sound of wind clawing at the windows like a living thing, the quiet that made you doubt you were still real. Yes, you'll remember. But not just for the suffering. You'll remember the small moments, the stolen seconds by the fire, the first time you saw sunlight after weeks of gray, the warmth of a chipped mug against your palms. You'll remember surviving. Historians will call this winter harsh. They'll record temperatures, snowfall, and storms. They'll mention shortages and prices, but they won't mention the human cost, the lives spent fueling other people's comfort. They won't say how many hands cracked open lighting someone else's fire, how many lungs filled with smoke so that parlors could glow with light. You glance toward the ceiling. The family upstairs is laughing again, their voices soft but clear through the boards. It's the sound of comfort built on exhaustion, the sound of peace bought with labor. You turn back to the fire in the servants' hall. It's small tonight, barely more than a glow, but it's yours. You stare at it until your eyes blur. The coals shift and sigh. You reach out, letting the warmth brush your fingertips. It's gentle now, not greedy. The cold hasn't left you completely. It never will. It's in your bones, your breath, your memory. But it no longer feels like a punishment. It feels like proof. Proof that you lived through something that wanted to swallow you whole. Proof that you gave warmth to a world that never thought to give it back. You smile faintly. Still here, you whisper. Outside, rain begins to fall, soft, steady, endless. The first real rain of the year. It taps against the windows, trickling through the gutters, washing away the last traces of ice. The house exhales long and slow, as if relieved. You close your eyes, listening to the sound. It's not silence anymore. It's something new. And somewhere deep in the walls, where soot meets stone and history sleeps, a single ember glows quiet, steady, eternal.